The new sticky on my mic. Is that just for me? Okay, good morning, everybody. I hope everyone had a wonderful holidays. Nice to see you be back in our favorite room. Don, roll call, please.
Representative Henderson. Representative Larson. Here. Representative Sherwood. Representative Stith. Here. Representative Walters. Representative Swanisser Dave. Here. Senator Anderson. Senator Guru. Here. Senator Kinski. Senator Salazar. Co-Chairman Nethercott. Chairman Nicholas.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Any introductory remarks before we get started? Don, any prelims, anything about today?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, not about today, but just to note some changes to your agenda. The governor's office will be presenting their governor's letters on Thursday of this week. Previously, that was scheduled for next Monday, so a couple days early for the governor's letters. In addition, on Tuesday, the House Appropriations Committee will be meeting over the lunch hour separately. So that provides the Senate maybe an extra half hour or so for your lunch on Tuesday. With that, Mr. Chairman, I have no further comments.
Okay. So first up is the Office of Administrative Hearings, Mr. Demers and Marilyn. So please proceed.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Nicholas, Chairwoman Nethercott, members of the committee. My name is J.C. Demers from the Wyoming Office of Administrative Hearings, and I have present with me our office manager, Ms. Marilyn Asher. We appreciate the committee affording us time to come and answer any questions regarding our budget. We had some personnel changes this year, which required us to seek additional assistance, more assistance than usual from the State Budget Office. So I'd also like to thank Director Hibbert and George Pitt for all of their time and patience in assisting us to prepare our budget this year. The Office of Administrative Hearings does administrative hearings for the state, which means agencies bring their cases before us. The vast majority of our cases are workers' compensation cases and driver's license cases. And we are funded 55% by Department of Workforce Services and 55% by the Wyoming Department of Transportation. In addition to that, we do what are called all other cases, which are agencies other than workers' compensation or the driver's license cases. And for those, we bill the agencies for the services that we provide. And then those monies are used to offset what we're paid by either Workforce Services or Wyoming Department of Transportation. There are 5 types of cases that we're required to take. Those are driver's license cases, workers' compensation cases, Department of Family Services, abuse and neglect cases, teacher termination cases, and state of Wyoming employee termination cases. The other cases that we have are as a result of other agencies asking us to take their cases. And in addition, I guess Wyoming Game and Fish, for their arbitration cases, in their rules has required that the Office of Administrative Hearings handle their arbitration cases. So I guess those are also cases that have to come to us. We have 6 hearing examiners and 5 support staff currently. We're budgeted for 1 additional support staff member. I would note that in fiscal year 22, we had 819 cases referred to us. In fiscal year 23, we had 983 cases referred. So that's a substantial increase. And during the months of November and December this year, we've had a bunch of cases referred to us. So I think the trend is going to continue to go up, but it's always hard to tell whether something's an anomaly or a trend. We have 1 exception request in our budget. That's for $18,712, which relates to computers and printers and associated equipment. At this time, I would ask the commission if there are any questions or concerns.
Questions for JC? So JC was in my law class and a good friend. So people in our law class affectionately refer to him as Spike as his nickname, just so you know. I have a couple questions. So the 55%, the question is that reasonable? Or is that something that needs tinkered with in terms of, I know the workers' comp cases are a little bit more complicated than the Y-dot ones and that type of thing, but just, do you monitor your time enough to know whether or not it's a right balance or not?
I know from speaking with Director Hibbert in the past that came about through a negotiation and analysis between the two agencies and ultimately an agreement. I think it's reasonable. I don't have a reason to think it's not. The workers' compensation cases are a lot more time consuming, but the driver's license cases are a lot more numerous. So I think it's a reasonable.
So then, next question is on your staff in terms of salaries. We don't really know I presume that you are able to give the same type of pay raises that the AG's office got and other entities for your staff and for your hearing officers. Is that accurate?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, it is, and it was very helpful. As you know, the Office of Administrative Hearings has a very experienced staff at this point in time. I mean, we have a lot of attorneys with a lot of years of experience, and I think the Wyoming public has greatly benefited from that, as well as the agencies that we serve, and we greatly appreciate those increases. Thank you.
How is your staffing in terms of hearing officers changed or modified over the past 10 or 15 years?
What I would say currently is that we have the most experienced staff that I think the Office of Administrative Hearings has ever had. And when I say that, I don't mean just in terms of legal experience, but in terms of actual litigation experience in the past.
Okay, that's all the questions I have. Any other questions? Okay. That's it. A lot of work.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I know Marilyn was worried about it.
You're
Yeah,
welcome.
perfect.
Well done, Marilyn.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is Agency 51 Livestock. Okay, we have the Livestock Board here, Director True. Please proceed. Oh, where is he? Where'd he go?
Chairman Nicholas, our
There he
director
is.
is
There
on
he
his way in. Thank you.
I'm looking around. Sorry about that. Anything else in your budget? Good morning, Director True. The floor is yours.
Mr. Chairman, Madam Co-Chair, Committee, good morning, and it's good to see you all. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to introduce the folks at the table first. My right is the President of our board, Sean Sims. To his right is Dr. Hallie Hazel, State Veterinarian. To my left is Jennifer Butler, our Fiscal Analyst. If it pleases the Chairman, I'd like to let President Sims make a brief introductory statement.
Absolutely. Go ahead. The floor is yours.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Sean Sims, your Livestock Board President at the time. Really appreciate the opportunity to come here and present our budget. As a board, we looked at this budget and our exception requests, and being mindful of the money that we would need to do this, the board had a lot of discussion, and we did approve the exception request that you'll see before you today and the budget. We think the Livestock Board does a
Come in.
pretty good
Yeah.
job with the money that we're given, and then with our brand inspection fees, it's fairly complicated. And with the USDA on the animal health portion of that, so we're working hard to keep the state livestock industry healthy and safe from theft and other issues. And with that, I turn it back to Director True.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I believe you like to go unit by unit.
Please.
Is that correct? I do want to bring your attention to our exception request page real quick for one correction, if I may. That's page 10 in your budget book. Priority number 7. I think there was just a lack of carrying a number across into the general fund column on that. That is a general fund request in that blank spot there. So, Mr. Chairman, just to share that quick little fix with you. And so then, Mr. Chairman, from there, we would go to page 15 for our first unit.
Okay, please proceed. Any questions before we get started? Go ahead.
This is the administration unit, Mr. Chairman, Madam Chair, that this is responsible for the day-to-day operation and oversight of the entire agency. We have 6 full-time employees, FTEs in that, and there are 2 exception requests for this unit. The first, Mr. Chairman, will be on page 13 of your budget book, and this is priority, exception request priority number 2. It's a new agency website. Wyoming Livestock Board is in need of a new website on which we can host a more interactive presence with our producers and the veterinarians that work with animal health and work with our producers for our brand renewal links. This priority request will also be able to fully integrate with priority number 1 when we get to that, the operating system for animal health, and aid in our compliance with Senate File 28 last year, which was the compensation process for veterinarians that do brucellosis testing.
So Director, sorry to interrupt, but as you walk through your exception requests,
Yes, sir.
they're, basically, they're almost all general fund versus your normal split, producer fees of 64%, 25%. So it just touch on those as you go through each one and why certain things are general fund and not a shared or a split, depending on, just kind of, if you explain that, then that will avoid those questions coming up as we go.
Perfect, Mr. Chairman, we will. This website, it currently is a general fund request. That would be for the purview of the committee, whether you would ask us to split that or not.
1 second, please.
And-
Similar.
And Director True, and by the way, thanks again for being here. It's good to see you. On this website, it's a one-time.
Yes, sir.
So I would take it that there's not an ongoing requirement for maintenance of that website, or would that then shift to your other funds? Just to explain that a little bit to me.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson, this is a one-time spend, and any maintenance, it would be based on an hourly charge, and we would deal with that through other budgetary means. Just for a quick story, when we presented this exception request to the governor's office, and Ms. Legursky may remember this, there was a moment there where I thought I totally lost the chief of staff. He was looking at his phone, and I thought, oh man, this isn't going very good. And then he put his phone down and he said, when you called your website rudimentary, that was pretty complimentary. So he was on there trying to move around our website on his phone, and as we discussed this process. So we would also add to our investigation of options, we got quotes and processes with a few different companies, and the company we chose that matched this bid is the ones that just did the new website for the Department of Ag. They've had the process of flow through money and process of the same fillable type PDF forms that we will need are happening at the Department of Ag. So that's why we chose this company that ETS approved and offered us this pricing for this.
Okay, please proceed.
Mr. Chairman, there also is another priority request, and you will see this floating through here. Some, request number 6, which is an Adobe Acrobat license, to be able to use those fillable PDF forms through this new website in a more functional fashion than the PDF we're using now. This is, in this case, a general fund request in admin. Mr. Chairman, if there are no more questions there, we would now jump to page 18, which is Unit 103. This is our, I went to 18, that would help. This is our Information Technology Department. There are no exception requests in this unit.
So, Director, would you just remind the committee what House Bill 134 in 2019, what that did?
Mr. Chairman, House Bill 134 was the bill where we changed our renewal period from just the straight 10 years to offering the extended renewal, where you could buy it in increments of 10 years up to 100. Required quite a bit of a rework in our brand renewal system at that time.
Okay, please proceed.
So, Mr. Chairman, on page 18 again was IT with no exception requests. You'll notice the blended split there. That's mostly paid for with brand inspection. So if there are no questions there, Mr. Chairman, now we'll go to Unit 201 Animal Health, which is on page 23. There are 2 exception requests in this unit.
Mr. Chairman, I apologize. Going back to page 21, if we could, Director Through on that exception request for the Core 1 operating system. It says in your object code that this is a maintenance agreement, but as I read your explanation, it sounds like it's for the purchase of the system. So is it for the purchase of the system? Is it for a maintenance? Just clarify that with, if you could.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson, I was just about to go to the exception request.
Okay. Thank you.
So, Mr. Chairman, this is a exception on page 21 is priority number 1, our first of 2 exception requests in animal health. This is a standalone operating system. It's on an ongoing agreement though with Core 1 Trace First that offers this program. That'll provide us direct links to the UW Vet Lab that will aid in the payments on the brucellosis compensation and in the gaining of pest charts in an immediate fashion to deal with HBO 180 of a year ago. This will also allow us to maintain confidentiality of our records as provided by 11-18-117 and standardize our health unit with other states. So there is an ongoing fee. This is an ongoing request of $298,000. Some incremental percentages that have been negotiated into the future, but that covers the maintenance is involved in that.
Go ahead.
So was there a cost for purchase?
Included in this, Mr. Chairman.
So what's the breakdown?
$298,000 per biennium.
Or no, so I want to know how much it cost and then what the maintenance agreement is. That should be 2 different things, should it not? If we buy it, well, and so let me clarify because this may be a little bit different, but typically what we see in agencies when they go in and they'll buy a system and then they buy a maintenance agreement to maintain that system. And that's what I'm trying to get through my head as if that's what happened here. And then I see that that's a pretty hefty maintenance agreement.
So, Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson, in our, it looks like in that first year, there is $12,000. Am I looking at that right? $12,000 worth of one-time fees. It's a subscription service. So there's an annual subscription and renewal, and then maintenance is included on top of that in that pricing. It's based on, that's their upgrades, they're working through the system and includes their build pertinent to Dr. Hazel's exact needs on the brucellosis side.
So did we do an RFP on this?
Mr. Chairman, we went through,
Chairman.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson, I'm probably defer part of this to Dr. Hazel, but she worked through the systems that were available. And if she wouldn't care to field that one.
Go ahead, please.
Morning, Dr. Hazel.
Good morning. Chairman Nicholas, Representative Larson. And so the question, there are only actually two systems available for state usage with regards to, for state veterinarians for storing, analyzing of data that we do as systems across the United States. There's really only two systems out there. There's this and one other. The other one that's currently available has had some breaches in the past. We were not comfortable with that situation. Price-wise, they're very comparable. This program is currently in 12 states, will be in 15 states very shortly. It also allows us to tie into our laboratory data network with the Wyoming State Veterinary Lab, but there are only two systems available.
I see.
So my question is, this will be an ongoing expense. You use all general fund dollars. Why wouldn't part of these funds come from your own revenues that you raise?
Mr. Chairman, historically, animal health has always been an all general fund unit. I don't know that our current fee structure could handle paying for something like this for animal health and brand inspection. That's kind of a standalone. It's actually now more like 90-10, the split there. So there's not much general fund activity. So in our effort to maintain that, the consistency of that program, I don't know that there's expenditures there in our current fund model for this. So having said that, as has always been historically, everything in animal health has been a generally funded proposition.
Okay, please proceed.
Mr. Chairman, if there's no other questions, you'll see that also priority number 4, another Adobe Acrobat license is included in this. So that's, again, to offer Dr. Hazel the ability to use the fillable forms and integrate those with the website and this system for the veterinarians for their compensation process and CVIs. Mr. Chairman, if there are no other questions,
Question, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
So if we don't fund it, Dr. Hassel, what does that do? Do you have anything in place now?
Chairman Nicholas, Representative Larson, we do have a software system in place that basically turns on and off. That would be the end of the story. Right now, we are unable to store our data. We can't analyze our data. We cannot manipulate data. If we do enter anything into it, it has to be by hand, but it cannot actually read that data. It does not have that capability. We can't manage our program per disease unless we do it all by hand on a piece of paper to enter everything into it.
Mr. Chairman, if I might add quick, the tie into the confidentiality statute on that, without going into any detail or any opinion on the potential RFID rule coming through the USDA, they added a new records keeping section of that rule that says anytime within 48 hours on their demand, we have to kick them all the information or data that we have. If we have in our current system, we can't protect that. In this core one, we can hold that information confidential until such time as Dr. Hazel, the board, and the chief executive determine that we can release any of that information to the federal agencies. That's to my mind, that is a nearly equal need, critical need going on in the future as to the operating system for the veterinarians. Sorry, if there's no other questions there, our next stop is at page 26, unit 205. This is our law enforcement unit. There is an exception request in this unit. And this exception request is at the request of the Joint Ag Committee. You have a letter in your packet from them asking to bring that funding for the law enforcement reimbursement account to full statutory funding of $500,000. There's also a letter of recommendation from the WASCOP, Wyoming Chiefs and Sheriffs Association in there. This is a quick reminder to some of you. Some of you are aware of the MOU programs that we use and the process that we use with those other law enforcement units. This one, we feel this gives us the opportunity to not only expand that program with the MOUs for targeted control and helpful investigations, but it also, we've started some conversations with the sheriffs and Wascop about what's the next step. What's the logical next step to make this program more efficient in order to multiply our force and work on livestock law training, livestock law investigations. And the fact, the sheriffs always tell me, look, we're all looking for the same guys. We're just looking for them for different things. So we need to link that information more widely. So that was the genesis of this request from Joint Ag and the conversation that happened at the committee meeting where they determined to write you this letter.
Representative Larson.
Thank you. So Director True, I appreciate that this is an ongoing request, but the narrative says to bring it up. And so shouldn't that be an ongoing one-time request to make sure that it's funded to the 500 rather than an ongoing being put in the standard budget?
Mr. Chairman, my understanding of Joint Ag's request was to bring this up and put it in our standard budget as a continuing appropriation. I would think it would then be a reversion and reloading, depending on the expenditures, and maybe a recalibration in the next biennium if it turns out that this is not suitable funding.
And then, Mr. Chairman, follow up, the 137,000 that's left in there, the current account balance is 137. That's just what's left of the prior appropriation. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson, that's correct. 105,000 of that is currently encumbered in the remaining MOUs that we have. I don't know that we will expend all of that. I would look down the table at Kevin and assume that he would take the dollars required at the end of the biennium when we've fully expended the encumbrances on those MOUs.
So then if the standard budget for this is 500,000, wouldn't that be your standard budget request with any reversions reverting back?
And what's the hope of a reload, Mr. Chairman? Yes, Representative Larson.
Representative Stiff.
Mr. Chairman, Director True, thank you. So this account's relatively new, having been established in 2019. The money that's been spent so far, you have two purposes. One is to reimburse the county sheriffs and the other is for training. What's the relatively split there? Has most of the money been for reimbursing the county sheriffs, or has most of the money been for training, or is it split about evenly?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Stiff, it's hard. Let me first say that the criteria to enter into one of those MOUs is you take our training, our livestock law training, that sheriff's office, and as many deputies as they will further into that training. So at this point, we have just carried the training in most cases. We go to them and do the class there. So there hasn't been a lot of cost to training. One of the next steps that's been requested is we are groups with several different Western state livestock law units and organizations who offer continuing education training in these areas. And that some of the training could maybe move some deputies from certain areas around the state to these trainings along with our folks. Our folks go every year, but maybe we could take a couple with us.
And Mr. Chairman, follow up.
Please.
A similar question then about the split on how it's funding. This is all general fund request. This unit, or this division for law enforcement is paid for 75% special revenue and 25% general fund. Is there a reason that you wouldn't have some of your special revenue being used to fund this account?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Stiff, the two things, the split is not quite that. The split is mostly general fund. In 2019, when this unit was reduced dramatically, there was enough general fund there to fund one officer's salary benefits and 1 2/3 officers' operating expenses for that one officer. In 2017. In 2019, then when we brought on a second officer, you approved a position if we would pay for it. So then that became paid for by our brand inspection fund account and a split from the animal remedy fees that the Department of Ag accepts. So the fund is probably 60-40 general fund, right? I would suspect it could be discussable item, whether this request was a split or not.
Representative Larson. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to come back. I've
Representative
got-
Henderson. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When you say expand, I just want to clarify, please. You're expanding within the 500K mark, or are you talking about expanding mostly training? Could you clarify what you're meaning by expand?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Henderson, so the unit is currently funded. The 500,000 request or to reach 500,000 is in that 1118-120, the law enforcement reimbursement account. We would love to expand our MOU process. We would love to take a next step into maybe some regional task forces, although I hate that term, on some kind of a setup. My senior investigator recently went to the rural crime school in Tulare, California, where they operate a statewide program, rural crime. Steals your four-wheeler, your gas, whatever, not just your livestock. And we would like to build something a little on their model, only not the way they fund it. They treat it similar to DCI's task force, where the task force takes somebody, funds them. We don't want to do that. We're after having one or two deputies in particularly targeted areas that are mostly livestock. So that when we have that thing that happens one end of the state to the other, everybody knows who to talk to. Trainings to put those groups together, trainings to link that communication. Plus expanding our MOU program. Right now, we're running it on fiscal years. We make those contracts for a fiscal year. We could expand some of those in these really busy counties to the biennial contract.
So Director True, I'm just trying to understand the structure of the request, because if I'm understanding what we're saying is we want to have 500,000 in that account. And so if we go to your page 26 and we look in your 900 series in 901, it seems like you would have a standard budget request for 500,000, but you don't. And then you come over and you want an exception request for 362,000. And in your explanation, you say that refills it up to 500,000. But if you follow this chart over, it doesn't do that.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson, so then the general fund exception request to 362 fills it from where that account stands today to 500,000. That's going to be a little variable depending on what we pay down those MOUs as time goes on.
So then what's your standard budget request for the next biennium?
For this next biennium, well, from bienniums forward, it would be $500,000. For now, it would be to take whatever our balance is and bring that to 500,000 for the biennium we'll be going into. So it could be 350, it could be up to 400,000.
And I apologize because I may be lost, but I would think that we'd have a standard budget request for that of 500,000. And we don't see that. Kevin, am I screwed up? And it's not unusual for me to be screwed up, so I apologize.
Mr. Chairman, the Joint Ag letter specified that their request was to bring the cash balance plus the new money up to 500,000. So that required a 362,847 to bring what they have in hand today to 500,000. And they're asking to make that a standard budget, the 362,847 a standard budget. Now they have a small $1,000 in the standard currently, but the letters specified this, and that's what we have.
So, Mr. Chairman, so the letter and this exception request is for the 362. And we show that at the end of the day, that's what the biennial amount would be, right?
Correct. What you have is a cash balance that they may or may not spend between now and the end of the biennium, plus a request for a standard budget of 362.
Okay. It just seems to me that if we're wanting to have a standard budget every biennium of 500,000, that would be your standard budget request. And then if there's any in excess of that at the end of the biennium, it would revert.
Mr. Chairman, I believe that the Ag Committee and the department are trying to do this on the best transparency basis that they can. They're looking for what they believe is necessary. Increasing it at $500,000 would perhaps most likely create a reversion, an ongoing reversion where each biennium we can revert money. Is that what we want to do, is to have money and anticipate to revert it? I'm not sure that that's what they intended.
So I've got a couple of questions. It looks to me like you're taking 11, 18, 120 and trying to expand it to make more dollars available for training. Is that at least at one part, is that accurate? Or MOUs?
Mr. Chairman, that would be one of the uses. The other use would be to expand the MOU program and then potentially build some regional hubs or regional task forces and then link that training.
So I think it would be useful if you could provide us with a breakout of how the funds have been expended since the fund was created and where it went and then what the specific payments were used for, kind of on a percentage basis on the MOUs versus other things. And so that'll help us understand what you want to do, I think. Because if we put, if you have a standard budget of 500,000, I presume you're going to spend it because it's not that hard to spend 500,000 for MOUs or for other, and use a portion of this for contract or for hiring, another investigator or for particular projects. And if that's the plan, then we'd like to know what that plan is and how it's going to be expended so that we can tailor it to do what just the plan is, but not have just a free pot of money there when you need it. So my next question then would be, tell us a little bit about what's going on in terms of livestock issues with theft, with issues that are going on that you've seen in the past 3 or 4 years or since the last time you presented to us. Is it going up? Is it going down? Or do we have new issues in terms of the, with the new animal identification processes that we're gradually moving into? What's the status of the industry in that regard?
Mr. Chairman, historically, we average between 50 and 60 missing or stolen reports a year. This year it's been a little different because of the winter kill. And we've had folks that aren't saying anything because they don't know if they're upside down under a sagebrush or a snowbank or where they're at. On the opposite side, I always tell our folks and the sheriff's offices that we have to pay attention because livestock producers are probably at their most vulnerable they've ever been. Market prices have been at record highs. The economy has been at record lows for certain people. That makes a cash crop theft fairly an opportunistic crime, makes butcherings very opportunistic crime. I think that's only going to stay static. I mean, as the brand areas shrink, it takes less time to get 3-headed cattle from the center of Wyoming to an area where there's no brand inspection. If they get them there, they're pretty well gone. We just need to try and investigate the players in that case. So I think that's going to continue to be an uptick in a problem.
So I appreciate that, but that's anecdotal and that's what you're forecasting. But what are the hard numbers of what's happened over the past years? Because we need to work off the hard numbers, not what our fear is of what the future's going to be.
So I'll give you 2017 numbers because they're my favorite. Was when we had that case from California with everything that went on. We had over 2,000 head of livestock reported missing or stolen in the state of Wyoming. Through brand inspection, strays at recovery at sale barns, and the work of our folks and other investigators, we were able to recover 1,400 head. That was about worth $2 million at that time. I don't know, I'd ask Representative Walters, that's probably worth 3.5 now.
So would you provide us with information about 2018, 2019, 2020, 21, and 22, and 23, so we can see what the data shows us?
And we have had, and one of the things that we hope, Mr. Chairman, to gain from the expansion of these MOUs is more data from the counties. A lot of times we don't hear their caseload. Some folks will report to them and not us. And some folks report to us and then we clue them in, but we don't always hear from them. So that would be more helpful information for us as well.
Mr. Co-Chairman,
Please go ahead.
just a quick question about this reporting of crimes. And so law enforcement's required to report all of this information into what's called NIBRS, which is a national database for all crime reporting. Are you required to do that as well? And that way that data is just easily attainable.
Madam Chairman, I would have to go check with my senior investigator and see if our data is put into that. I'm not aware of that. Can't answer that right now. I will
Great.
find that out. We do keep a subscription service, law enforcement service, where we have our data. Whether because of the blend between officers and our agency assist. A ton of our cases are agency assist and we're the related charge. I'm not sure how that flows, so I'll have to find that out.
And I'm assuming somehow there's a criminal investigation that ensues at some level of the missing or of livestock. And so either way, that data is recoverable through that system.
Okay, Madam Chairman, I'll look into that. Thank you.
Okay, please proceed.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Chairman. One more.
So could you remind me again of that remaining 137, 153 you've got obligated in this fiscal year? How much?
105,000, Mr. Chairman.
So you have 32,000 left in the account.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
And then, Mr. Chairman, I might add that we are on the cusp of signing one more agreement that will be one going forward. So that would make 120.
Mr. Chairman and Director True, then can you see the,
Mr. Chairman, I see your disconnect, and that's also why I referenced that this amount could be a little fungible as we get towards the end of the biennium.
thank you.
Senator Drew.
Mr. Chairman.
What, Senator Cruz?
Oh,
Sorry. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Drew, good morning. The co-chair was asking about information and I was wondering, and the other co-chair was talking about information that's available. You talked about expanding the program because I'm talking about rural crime, theft of crime, whether it's fuel or whatever things out on the range. That data should be available too. I was wondering if we're going to expand that program, there's obviously the folks in agriculture have asked you to do this, committees ask you to do this, so that that is part of the reason why. So there must be some data that led them to that conclusion. And if we could get that, that would be super helpful as well.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Grew, I'll have to ask the sheriffs for that data. We're not, our folks are not statutory allowed to do rural crime, only livestock crime. So I'll have to go elsewhere to get rural crime data. But I'll ask the sheriffs for that.
Please.
I just want to make sure I understood when you were talking about the expansion of the program, that is what you were talking about, was setting up a pilot. You talked about the California program you saw, that's why you were doing it. So that, okay, so that question is relevant to that. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Groot, yeah, we'll poke at that, and I would add that the other parties that have great interest in this are the oil and gas security people, because they're involved in all that same big open country with more tools at their disposal. They wouldn't be part of the MOU, but they're happy to teach classes to the sheriff's deputies and our folks.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. Back to the exception request on page 25. Just trying to track all the math through. So the request is 362,847 based on 137,153 in the account at the time of this printing of this budget request. But then you say you have 105,000 obligated before the end of the biennium is what I would say. So by the end of June in 24, you're going to have spent 467,000, 468,000. So if you want 500,000 in the account for the next biennium, the 25-26 biennium, you would need to actually have an exception request here of closer to $460,000 so that you would hit that 500 mark versus the 380 or 362. And I've rounded a few numbers in there, but I want to make sure that my math explanation is really what where you're trying to get is to start the new biennium on July 1 with 500,000 in this account. And you're asking this committee to put the amount necessary to achieve that. Because if we just put 362, you're going to start the next biennium on July 1 with less than 500 based on what you just described in the last few minutes.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Walters, yeah, I agree with everything you just said. That amount could go up considerably for what the request is. I don't know how to deal with that. Ag entered the request this way. I would leave it to Mr. Hibbard to explain with you how he would deal with that.
Mr. Chairman, this came from another committee, and we put this request in here as the committee asked us to. I think the key question here is what's the burn rate? How much do you need per year? Is it 180,000 or is it 250,000? This would suggest that the burn rate's 180,000 per year, or $362,000 change by any.
Well, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Director Hibbard, if, you know, we've got this, is that account, it says it would bring the account to 500,000. Is there anything statutory or anything documented that says that's what that account should be?
Mr. Chairman, I think the history that's available to us for what's taking place is short, because we used to have 3 or 4 more brand inspectors themselves, and then they were removed. And then what happened was, I believe that we started helping out the local governments with the cost when they helped us. For example, I'm cognizant of a situation where cattle were died by a person that happened to be the neighbor with, you know, basically, you know, see if it's a bred heifer or not, but they died, all kinds of stuff on them. And then that particular locality had an investigation, and that particular locality received benefits from this because there's not enough, no longer the same number of positions as we once had in here.
Well, and I get that. I'm just trying to figure out where the magic number comes from. And if that looks like Don, please.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, there is a statute that governs this account. It's 11-18-120, and it provides 2 triggers, if you will. One is at the end of each biennium, any unexpended, unobligated funds shall revert to the general fund. So let's say you had $100,000 left over on June 30th. That $100,000, according to the statute, should sweep back to the general fund. The second component of the statute is, unless otherwise provided in a footnote or other law, the account balance shall not exceed $500,000. So that was an agreed upon policy of previous legislatures, that the max in this account can be 500,000.
And so, Mr. Chairman and Don, so typically then they would make a request in their standard budget for what they felt they needed in that account. That would be an agency request.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, and you may want to include a footnote. It's not in the agency's request, but you may want to include a footnote to allow them to retain any balance in their account on June 30th, in addition to the $362,000 that they're requesting. Otherwise, on July 1st, it really wouldn't be 500,000.
Thank you.
So did we not receive an email from the 2 chairs that said they were going to bring a separate bill on this particular issue as a follow-up? I thought I saw that email. Don?
Mr. Chairman, I believe what you're referring to is they have some concerns with the farm loan program.
Oh, okay.
Different issue.
Okay. Any other questions? Representative Swanson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director True, I assume there's no revenue source that goes into this law enforcement account.
Mr. Chairman, Representative, that's
And Mr. Chairman, a follow-up. Is there a capability of establishing some sort of a fee through all the ways that fees are established to develop one that would have some sort of a revenue source, so we don't have to always look at 100% general funds?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, I'm not sure how I would structure fees for an creative process for law enforcement.
So, and I think I can help answer that. When we were short on money back in, was it 2019, we evaluated your agency along with a lot of other ones and created different types of fees. We modified the branding fees and all that kind of stuff to try to pass the, the overall, part of the overall obligations back to the industry versus the state and in different components of it. And what we see here is part of what we did back then to do just that. And it's always a question of how much we pay in general funds, not only for you, but for Department of Ag and various different resources. But on all of these, at some point, the Ag Committee and or JAC has to look at who should be paying the fair share for what we finance.
So, Mr. Chairman, so those ideas were vetted back in 2019. And the boards looked at those options and there's no logical way of coming up with a revenue source.
And we forced it upon them back then because we didn't have enough money.
Mr. Chairman, Representative, my biggest caution would be lack of reporting. If we were to charge a fee, and we wouldn't get any revenue and we wouldn't have any reports. I think could be the biggest thing that would happen there.
Okay, any other questions? Please proceed.
Mr. Chairman, we'd like to go to page 30 now, which is unit 301. We're getting into the brucellosis things, and Dr. Hazel will handle your questions on this. This unit budget relates to an MOU we have with the lab for support for brucellosis testing. This is a pass-through. These are pass-through dollars. In the last, gosh, I don't remember if it was the supplemental or in the last budget session, you added 60,000 to this. This was a $203,000 appropriation. This money passes through to the vet lab. There are no exception requests. If you have any questions about this, I'd defer them to Dr. Hazel.
Okay, please proceed.
Mr. Chairman, next is on page 32. This is unit 302, brucellosis travel. This is general fund, $7,200. This appropriation was established at the beginning of the brucellosis outbreaks and the DSAs in the 3 states. And this covered the travel and business of the state veterinarian going to those other 2 states to determine the establishment of the designated surveillance areas. Dr. Hazel and her group still use this to move around on brucellosis travel. Mr. Chairman, the next unit is unit 303 on page 35. This is brucellosis testing. This is the vital unit that relates to our board's efforts to maintain brucellosis prevention and surveillance for the state. There is 1 position listed in this unit. This is an AWAC admin assistant position, which is funded through the USDA grant. There is 1 exception request in this unit, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
It is priority number 3. This is veterinary compensation for doing the brucellosis testing. I would defer the explanation of that to Dr. Hazel.
Please explain, Dr. Hazel.
Chairman Nicholas, we compensate our veterinarians for doing the brucellosis testing within our designated surveillance area and other areas as designated throughout the state. And currently that fee has not been increased since 2009. And it's $5 per head. There are several different fees.
$5.
And we outlined the different fees. The request that we're asking for is to increase that compensation, to bring it into date with more up to date with our current postage and supplies and needles and syringes. They were receiving $5 per head. We're receiving $5 per head. And if we don't ask for an increase in reimbursement to our veterinarians for this, they're going to have to start passing that cost along to the producers, which is what we absolutely would like to prohibit them from doing. We don't want them to have to do that because this is a state mandated program. And since we have not increased it since 2009, and we also compared it with our surrounding DSA states, so that would be Idaho and Montana. And in your information here, you'll find out about how many we do. We tend to average around 80,000 tests per year, but that's based on-farm testing, livestock market testing, and other vaccination procedures that we do. So the reimbursement is for all those different procedures that we require. So it's testing at the livestock markets, it's doing custom slaughter surveillance, and it also involves adult vaccination or spaying if required by a mitigation herd plan. And so we're asking for an increase in that reimbursement.
So could you provide us a breakdown of how you developed the 240,000? Because all we see when I read through it is, so we don't have a description of what how you came to the 240,000.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
Dr. Hazel, if we're currently at $5 a head, what does that mean? What's the change from this is?
Representative Larson, could you repeat the question, please?
So I'll turn my mic on. So we were at, you noted that currently we're at $5 a head and we're asking for this increase. And I'm just wondering what that increase brings it to per head. From $5 to what?
We're asking is to take that increase from $5 per head up to $6.50 per head for on-farm testing. We're also asking in the same request, we're asking for a couple different increases for our reimbursement. One is from $5 to $6.50 per head for our veterinarians on farm. I'm sorry, $5 to $6 per head on farm. And then for livestock market testing, we're asking to go up to from $5.50 to $6.50. And for our custom slaughter, we're asking to go from $3.50 up to $4.50. We also have a reimbursement process for our livestock markets who provide the labor for testing these cattle. And we're asking to go from $2 per head to $3 per head. And then we have an adult booster vaccination increase from $3.50 to $4 and spaying for $6.50 to $8 per head.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Hazel, that document you're reading from, it would be great if you could provide that to us, because I couldn't write fast enough to be able to track what your current rate is for each of these categories to what your, the new rate would be based on this $240,000 overall increase. So if you could provide that, that would be outstanding.
Certainly, absolutely.
So if you know, what does Idaho and Montana do in their reimbursement fees? And who pays for it? Do they do, is it general fund dollars on their side? Is it more industry supported? How do they handle it?
Chairman Nicholas, and I apologize. I thought you guys had this. Otherwise, I wouldn't have read through that so quickly. So my apologies. So in Idaho and Montana, most of this comes out of their general fund for reimbursement. There are some private programs in Montana, but they are not related specifically to this type of reimbursement. But it is through general fund in those states as well. And I'm sorry, what was the rest of your question?
Well, that was basically it. So, okay. And well, also the amounts. What do they pay per head in Montana and Idaho, if you know?
And
Or
all
just-
this will be in this when we give it to
Okay.
you as well.
That would be great. So once we can just see it, you don't have to.
Certainly, thank you.
All right. Representative Stitt.
Mr. Chairman, Director, so a follow-up question on the fees. If the fees go up, then that increases your special revenue to compensate veterinarians, I would imagine. So is the $240,000 general fund in addition to that, or should there be some split between general fund and your, special revenue?
So I don't
Mr.
think
Chairman, Representative
those aren't fees.
Stiff,
That's what they pay.
this is what we pay, and this is not this is all general fund. There is no brand inspection. We have brand inspection fees, brand renewal fees. We don't have any animal health. All this again falls under the animal health has always historically been a generally funded.
Thank you.
So I am curious, what is the, I forgot the terminology used, but where do you do the regular brucellosis testing? At what areas of the state versus, in other words, how much are we covering just that region that has prone to brucellosis versus the other parts of the state?
Chairman Nicholas, what we're doing is we're covering reimbursement fees for, or reimbursing veterinarians for testing in Wyoming's designated surveillance area, which is the 6, give or take, counties along the western side of our state where we have brucellosis issues because of commingling with elk. This also covers testing, for example, if we have issues in the bighorns. It will cover any testing that we ask to be done of those cattle if they're in a high-risk area, or if there's a high-risk need to study that area. It also covers that reimbursement for testing. It also covers testing at our livestock markets for any brucellosis testing that would occur, and that's at all 4 markets within our state.
And so how does that break down in terms of actual amounts of testing? How much are just in that 6 county region versus where do you do the market testing?
So
Is that-
I'm sorry, you asking how does that break down per?
Numerically, the number of tests and
Oh.
and the cost. Yeah.
Certainly. So for example, we average 80,000 tests per year. We were down a little bit the last year or two because of COVID, and we're still ramping back up because of that. But on ranch is about 56,000 tests, at markets is about 9,000 tests, and slaughter plants is about 10,500 tests. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah. Okay, further questions? So providing that background information will just be helpful for us. We appreciate it. All right, please proceed.
.303, we will go to page 38. And then we're going to step into the federal grant splits. I would just note one thing, that the USDA grant for brucellosis is included in that 303 budget you just looked at. These would be the other 2 that we split off a few years ago. The committee may remember they were headlined as a Department of Homeland Security grant. And we came in and changed them to a 440 and a 442. And I'd let Dr. Hazel talk about those and their uses. Page 38 is the avian health unit.
Go ahead.
First, I'll go over the avian health, Chairman Nicholas. And as you all may have heard in the past few years, avian influenza has been a huge issue across the United States. Wyoming does not have any commercial poultry producers. We do have some commercial game bird operators who are also impacted by avian influenza. So the avian portion of our cooperative agreement allows us to test for avian influenza across our state. It also provides for testing for Salmonella pylori typhoid, which is required for our producers to be able to export and sell their birds across the United States or their hatching eggs. So that's what covers the avian costs.
Okay, questions? Please proceed.
Mr. Chairman, next would be page 40, which is the 442, which is for equine, cervid, and small ruminants. And then if it pleases the chair, I would ask Dr. Hazel to give you a little synopsis of where the USDA's grant program and USDA grant personnel supply is sitting and going in the next list.
So Chairman Nicholas, with regards to equine, cervid, and small ruminants, this funding allows us to do further equine testing if there's an unusual disease in our state or an unusual disease occurrence. For example, last year or earlier this spring, due to the wet spring that we had an unusually high incidence of West Nile in our horses. And USDA allowed us to provided some extra funding for us to do further neurological testing on these equine because of the unusually high rate of neurological disease or symptoms we were seeing in our equine. This also helps us cover the cost of scrapie sampling within our state, excuse me. We are required to meet a minimum number of scrapie samples for scrapie surveillance across the United States. And so that allows us to help participate in that. And that also impacts our livestock markets as well with regards to scrapie sampling in sheep. As Director True mentioned, with our USDA cooperative agreement, as everyone is quite aware, Congress does not have a budget as of yet. Hopefully by January 19th, we'll have something. Because of that, it impacts directly our cooperative agreements that we receive from USDA. We know that our cooperative agreement funding will be significantly decreased the coming budget year, and our cooperative agreement year runs from April 1st to March 30th, not to confuse with other budget periods. But we know it's going to be decreased, and it could be decreased by up to, say, $150,000 to $200,000, which is a very significant impact upon our budget. They have also taken away 3 personnel from our states, 3 positions that have become vacant in the last 3 months that will not be filled. and that is an animal health technician, well, 2 animal health technicians and a veterinarian. So we are losing that portion, which significantly helped our staff with disease issues in Wyoming. So we've lost 3 field people, and so our staff of 3 veterinarians is having to make up for losing 3 more people, which is a significant impact upon our programs.
So what, I take it that happened to other states as well. I mean, what was the genesis of that?
So Chairman Nicholas, it depends upon the state. It just so happened that we had those 2 positions that were vacated in the last few months. If other positions are not vacated, they may or may not go away in other states. It just depends upon whether they're filled or not and what those state budgets look like.
That doesn't make sense.
If the position is vacated, they can choose not to fill that position. And so it just depends upon that situation.
Go ahead.
So then, with spreading your 3 staff significantly thinner, then do you have the ability to contract out with other veterinarians to meet the needs? Is that, or what is the plan if to do that, or do you just cover it with the 3 you have?
So Chairman Nicholas, Representative Larson, we do have the ability to do a small amount of contracting with other veterinarians. The problem is, as many are aware, we don't have enough large animal veterinarians in our state already. So finding veterinarians to contract with is extremely difficult because they are just not here. At this point in time, we are trying to cover that with the minimal staff that we have. And that could change in the potential future. Yeah, yes.
Okay. Please proceed. Our favorite. Estrays.
Mr. Chairman, I think we're ready to go to page 43, unit 601, which is the estray unit. This is the appropriation that handles the management of estrays according to chapter 24. This has been reduced significantly over the years. It's always been a fund that you appropriate, we revert what we don't use, and we cycle it back again because we never know what we're going to have gathered up in a stray and what the care and cost of care may be for those. No exception requests in this unit.
All right, please proceed.
Mr. Chairman, next is page 52, which is 701, brand inspection. Mr. Chairman, this unit has 6 permanent employees and 96 AWAC positions. This is our main unit in the agency. We do have 1 exception request for the Adobe Acrobat license again. This one is under special funds, special revenue. This is not a general fund request. Beyond that, there are no exception requests in this unit.
So I'm curious on page 48 on the earmarked funds. You've got estimated in 23, 24, ending balance of 10 million, almost 11 million. And then your estimate in 25, 26, it drops down to 8 million. And then 27, 28, it drops down to 5 million. So I'm just trying to understand those numbers.
Mr. Chairman, you're looking at the expenditures or the revenues? 48 is expenditures in my book.
The ending balance. At the bottom of
The ending balance, Mr. Chairman, is sometimes that does not take into effect the every other year basis of brand renewal. So our main source of revenue comes every other year with brand renewal. Brand inspection numbers the last 3 years have declined. So it's based on that. That's still, that 5 million is still at the level based on the statutory request that we maintain at least 1 year's operating. That's a little above what it takes us 1 year.
So those numbers will change over time.
Yes, they're variable.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, please proceed.
So, Mr. Chairman, next and last is page 56. This is a predator control. Again, this is pass-through money. This is money that we collect at the time of brand inspections. We process it, send it to the treasurer's office, and they resort it to the county predator. In the last biennium, this is one of the things you gave us an increase there to reduce our B11 rule. We always seem to collect more money than was allowed So we have to BLM that money, but I think this is a amount that has covered us now for the last 2 years. We do retain 5% of this processing, the rest goes back to the printer. So, Mr. Chairman, unless you have further question, that completes.
Please go ahead.
Director True, if we could go, just make a request of you on that, law enforcement request, that 500,000. Could you go back for since we implemented, we took those positions away, but more of that burden on having a contract with counties and stuff, could you give us kind of an annual average or an annual amount since we've done that, so we can kind of see what,
That we have spent from that account, Mr. Chairman, okay,
you know, and give that to us, just trying to.
we can do that. And
Figure
Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson, you may or may not recall, in a budget footnote, when that was established, you funded it at $250,000 the first time.
Fair enough, but was that was that enough? It's,
Not to where we want to be, Mr. Chairman, Representative, but I would say during the time as we've established this, it took us a while to get that MOU program up. And now we have more counties and more sheriffs wanting to be interested in that.
well, and Director True, you know, this whole conversation is really not being critical about the request, just trying to figure out the right request and how to do that. And so when you say we funded it at $250,000, and you're saying, so I realize it's not what you want, but what is it that you really need? We can't go statutorily, we can't exceed 500,000. Is this 362? Does that cover your costs for a biennium in a reasonable way, or do we need, you know, we still got some process here to go, and we're just trying to figure out the right number.
Correct, Mr. Chairman, Representative, we'll get you those numbers.
Mr. Chairman, if I could comment from a livestock owner out in the country. This program was set up, of course, we had 7 investigators across state. That was reduced to 1. We were able to add another one with the brand recording fees. But what this does is, as far as hard numbers as catching people in that, maybe, you know, it doesn't have that effect. But what it does with those sheriffs being out there and having those MOUs and that placard on the door, driving down the road, those people that are inclined to do those, you know, that livestock theft, those crimes, with having more of that available and in places they're normally not at, has a huge deterrence. And so when we say we want to grow the program, you know, we want to grow more of those contracts with more sheriffs in more counties, not necessarily grow a you know, behemoth of a program. It's getting that placard on that door, those sheriffs trained so they know what they're going to run into when they come upon these situations. So I would that's one of the best programs as far as livestock theft and crime in rural areas I think we can do. Thank you.
Okay, anything else?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for withstanding us. All right, next, we've got Enhanced Oil Recovery Commission. Come on up. Okay, Enhanced Oil Recovery Commission, welcome, good to see you. Please proceed.
Thank you, and we're pleased to be here. We're pleased to be in our 20th year, the EURI and EURC, and providing technical assistance to oil and gas operations in Wyoming. I think we're the only agency exclusively dedicated to oil and gas. So we've had a good year, and our staff of 9 continues to provide according to our mission, which really is to put oil in the tank and increase revenue through severance tax increases for the state of Wyoming.
Chairman,
Go ahead.
could we get you to introduce yourself so everyone knows who the two of you might be and whatnot?
That's a good way to start. I'm Lon Whitman, Director of EORI.
Bob King, I'm Chairman of the Natural Recovery Commission, which we oversee the URI.
Go ahead.
Sure. So this year, I think this past year, we worked with roughly 12 operators in the state. We focused largely on conventional oil and gas fields, legacy fields, helping operators get more oil out through primary, secondary, tertiary recovery. Certainly this group is aware of the capture and sequestration movements in the state. We feel very linked in the middle of that with CO2 EOR as a primary storage mechanism, and one where you do receive revenue back through the oil sales. So we're busy with that. We have currently 5 developing CO2 EOR projects in Wyoming that we're involved with. And we're pleased to see that moving forward. I've been very involved in draft legislation that's being put together for a severance tax initiative to level the playing field for the 45Q tax credit, which includes CO2 EOR as an option for storage. But your numbers are 85 and 60, 85 for dedicated storage, 60 for enhanced oil recovery. We thought it was beneficial to look at options on how the state could level that playing field and make both options advantageous. From our perspective, certainly having oil production through storage is a good way to go for the state. So we've been involved. I've been involved in that process since July with Petroleum Association of Wyoming, School of Energy Resources, putting this draft legislation together. Some of the highlight projects we've worked on, any number of things from water flood developments to CO2 EOR, as we mentioned. We have a new RFP process out, and we're looking at chem flooding or polymers. Pilot projects are a key part of what we do and help operators test new technologies or technologies that exist that might work in their fields. So I think for a small staff of 9, we're quite well situated, and we advance our work quite effectively. I think that's probably a good overview.
Okay, let's just turn and walk through unit by unit in your budget.
Sure. So we had no exceptions or requests, Chairman. There is a change on our budget from last year. In the budget hearing with the governor, it was suggested that allocations that were being made for example, the governor's raise allocations, not be sent to the University of Wyoming and be included in this budget, which is the increase you see from the 23-24 budget biennium.
So is that that increase we're seeing in your Series 100 that go where you had 450 and now it's $1 million?
Mr. Chairman, yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
So that's the only addition, and there was no requests or exception.
Go ahead.
So, and yeah, this is probably the right time. You'll recall back in the 2022 budget bill, we cleaned up in a section 300, a lot of the prior budgets in this agency and kind of give a timeline till 2026 to get those used up, and then they would start, they would, and then the reversions from the 23 and 24 budget will start reverting June 30th of 24. We got all of that squared around? You'll recall that conversation. Do we have that? You guys, does that fit now?
Mr. Chairman, yes, I think that's all set now.
Okay.
Don, does that really answer that question?
Yes, just to give a little bit of highlight on that, there were about 15 years of old appropriations that should have been reverted and were not. The Joint Appropriations Committee in the legislature elected to allow EORC to use those funds through June 30th of 2026. So they have another 2.5 years to get that completed. However, last year's appropriation for the 23-24 biennium, if not expended, does revert on June 30th, 2024 in, 5 months from now. So I think that was the purpose of Representative Larson's question, that this biennium's funds will be subject to reversion on June 30th.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, so we're just trying to make sure that we're all on the same page. This biennium, any reversions will revert. We've got a couple more years to use those prior reversions, and just wanting to make sure that you're seeing that the same way we are.
Mr. Chairman, that's correct.
So how much is remaining of those funds? that you need to
Mr.
spend?
Chairman, we had the initial amount that was through an audit, 2.1 million. I believe 200,000 of that had already been expended, so we started with 1.9 million. And we're using that exclusively for pilot studies and field work. So that's no internal operations or any of that type of thing. We have these RFPs that are out, so I don't think we'll have any problem spending the 1.9 by June 30th, 2026.
Okay, all right.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator?
Mr. Whitman, what increase is this? You're asking for 4,749,000. Is that, what's the percent increase from 23, 24?
20, I think it's roughly 300,000. I'd have to look for the number, Mr. Chairman. It's, again, that increase is due to reallocating raises from the governor's office that had gone directly to the university will now be fully put into the EORC budget.
So in essence, that's just a swap.
Mr. Chairman, that's correct. And it facilitates much clearer bookkeeping for us because we know exactly what the allocation is and when the allocation is given to us. Rather than sometimes there's delays through the university system before you receive that actual allocation, but you're already expending it. So to simplify the budget and the monthly reports for the EORC, it was suggested that those allocations go directly to the EORC and not through the university.
Okay, anything else? Seeing none? Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Yeah.
So we're scheduled for a break at 10, so we're half an hour ahead of schedule. So let's take a 10-minute break and we'll come back and start with Burma Band.
Thank you.
Yeah. See you, Bob.
Okay, we are back, just about back. Yeah, we got a quorum over there. Got a quorum over here. Doug, fire away. Good to see you.
Yeah, I'm Doug Miyamoto with the Wyoming Department of Agriculture. And with me today, I have our Administration Division Manager, Julie Cook. We also have some division managers from the Department of Ag backing us up. So if you have technical questions, hopefully we'll be able to get to all of those. I would
Okay.
like to direct your attention to a spreadsheet that we included in our budget book. And the title of that is 25-26 Exception Budget Requests for the Wyoming Department of Agriculture. We have all of our exception budget requests laid out in this spreadsheet by priority. And just to give you some background, the way that we develop this list in the Department of Agriculture is we have a tiered system for what we're going to submit for exception budget requests. And the highest priority on this list are what we call tier 1 items. And those are things that we do at the Department of Agriculture that have a direct impact on human health and
So
safety.
Doug, can you show us what you're looking at? That's in the budget book? Okay, let's see. Everyone see it? That's good. It's in the handouts.
We just submitted it as a handout. It's a spreadsheet that just breaks down all of our exceptions.
So it's in the binding. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So the way we prioritize these exception requests, tier 1 are those that have a direct impact on human health and safety. Our tier 2 priorities are those that are needed to directly impact folks' ability to conduct commerce in the state of Wyoming. So these would be items such as scale inspections, fuel inspections, that type of work that we do that you have to have a license in order to legally conduct business in Wyoming. And then everything else are the other statutorily mandated duties of the Department of Ag. So what you'll see in this exception request for 25-26, primarily for the Department of Ag, we're looking to replace some equipment that has surpassed its lifespan. And we need to basically bring on new equipment in order to maintain our capacity. And then we have a couple of items in our list this year where we're being asked to do some additional inspections and conduct some work that we haven't in the past. And so we have some capacity building exception requests as well. And Mr. Chairman, with your permission, the way I would like to run through these budget requests would be to handle all of the Department of Ag requests first and defer the State Fair requests to the end, where we can call up the State Fair Manager, Courtney Conkle, and she can run through her exception items if that's okay.
Well, actually, the way we've been doing it, easiest for us is just to do a page turn in the budget.
That sounds fine. We can do that as well. Would you like me to run through all of our budget units individually or just hit the exception request?
No, let's
Okay.
hit, it's a fast turn, but let's just
Okay.
walk through them because all of our notes or a lot of this are on each page is in our budget books.
Happy to do it. All right, with that, Mr. Chairman, I would direct your attention to page 19 of your budget book, and that is our first budget unit. This is our administration division. We do have an exception request in our administration division this year, and that request can be found on page 20.
Representative Larson, go ahead.
In your introductory in your administration division, you talked about grants management. Is that solely within the agency, or do you do grants management for producers or agencies or communities? I was just curious on that as I read it.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Representative, those are for grants specific to the Department of Agriculture,
you.
those that we're signatory to.
Thank you.
Okay, any questions on? Okay, please proceed.
Okay, on page 20 is our first exception request. And this is in our administration division. This is just IT replacements. And so this is computers, software subscriptions, and printers. This obviously got ETS review, and the governor did recommend approval of this budget request.
So, Doug, is this a quarter or a half of all computers? Are you doing this sequentially over time?
Mr. Chairman, yeah, there's a replacement schedule. This represents about half.
And are you replacing screens as well as computers?
Mr. Chairman, no.
Okay. All right, please proceed.
Okay, our next budget unit can be found on page 24.
Go ahead.
So, Director, I was curious as I look at your chart on page 22 in your software, and it's in your Series 240, you had 38,000 in your base budget, but you didn't have any in your standard budget for software, and then your 63, is that just your IT stuff that we have?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, that's correct.
So was the 38 in your base budget, was that part of your previous standard budget, or were those exceptions as well?
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
thank you. 240s, 240 series are one times.
Okay. Perfect.
Go
Thank
ahead.
you.
Go ahead then.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On page 24, you'll find our next budget unit. This is support for the Board of Agriculture.
Representative Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry for the interruption. So is that the same one time for the item just below that? 242, is that one time?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if you look on page 22, you will see 240 to 249 if it's possible. You see that those are zeroed out in column 3, 240s. 0 to 240 to 249 is a one-time event.
All right, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Support for the Board of Agriculture on page 24 of your budget book. There are no exception requests for the Board of Agriculture for this biennium.
Okay, go ahead.
Our next budget unit can be found on page 26, and this is support for the brucellosis task force. And again, there are no exception budget requests for this upcoming biennium.
Go ahead.
So Director, how often does the task force meet?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, historically, that task force has met 2 times a year. In recent years, it's been 1 time or less. It was interrupted quite significantly by the pandemic. And now that task force has voted to reduce the frequency of meeting to 1 time a year.
And follow up, Mr. Chairman. And so I was looking in that 2004 legislative session. I couldn't find a brucellosis task force. I could find House Bill 54. And so I was just wondering, was the intended, if you could maybe give me the reference to the bill in 2000, you don't need to do it now, but was the intent in that bill is to have that task force ongoing, or does it need to be renewed upon request?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, I'll have to get back to you on
Would you please?
that one. I'm happy to do that.
Thank you.
Well, and at the same time, you could tell us, should it continue? I mean, what?
Mr. Chairman, I think that the brucellosis task force, it's good to get the players in the room periodically to discuss latest advances and have the vet lab come in and give us the latest and greatest on state of the science, so to speak. The task force has been focused on a lot of research and trying to develop vaccines for that disease for a number of years. I think it's beneficial to talk about that from time to time. And if the university has a research direction that they would like to go, that's something that obviously we could support and help in some way by applying for different grants or trying to aim our programs in that direction. So I do think periodic review of status is a good idea for the task force.
So Director, I was trying to correlate the task force, perhaps that's what the Livestock Board does because they do the testing. Is there something there that the task force does that they couldn't really just glean from what the Livestock Board is producing?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, the way I would characterize the role of the task force is it's an all-encompassing body that takes the work of the Livestock Board, the technical work of the State Vet Lab, the research of the university, and then the outreach and contact education programs that we have in the Department of Ag, and kind of brings it together so that everybody is somewhat more coordinated on a common problem. So there is different tasks assigned when it comes to this budget unit and the brucellosis task force. The only thing that's in this budget for the Department of Ag is we process and pay for the travel vouchers for the members of that task force. And that's really our role, but we do attend to make sure that we know what's going on when talking about brucellosis and status in Wyoming. But the technical work really should be left with the Livestock Board.
Thank you.
Go ahead. Next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On page 29 is our next budget unit. This is livestock market reporting. We have no exception budget requests for this upcoming biennium.
Next.
On page 33 is the beginning of our Consumer Health Services division. We do have exception budget requests in this division this time. The first one of those can be found on page 35. And this is a licensing system upgrade. And so the way this works, we have 27 other states that all use common software for these type of inspections in consumer health. There was a program called USA Food Safety that all of these states, including us, used. That program is now going obsolete and will no longer be supported by the developer. USDA and those 27 other states are shifting to a new software program that's called SAFER. And USDA is offsetting the cost of that to some degree. We think it's the best alternative to maintain our programmability and being able to do those inspections. And so that's what this request is for. The governor did recommend approval of this exception request.
So, Director, you and I had a brief conversation where this is one of those where currently, if I look at your series 900 and 901, you've been running around 34,000. Now we're going to increase this to 200,000. Pretty significant. 100,000 a year is pretty significant. Is that what we need to do? I mean, is there no, how do we come to that amount? It sounds like you're doing this because other states are doing the same way rather than using the same software, this licensing. Is it an upgrade of what we currently have, or just help me understand, because it is pretty significant increase.
It is a significant increase, Mr. Chairman, Representative. Yes, it is a significant increase. I don't know what to say other than these type of software agreements just get more expensive all the time. And I wish that were not the case.
Yeah, we need to run the state like a software licensing company, so we can increase our fees all the time and have someone else pay.
Mr. Chairman, we did analyze, trying to develop this through ETS as well, and trying to make a customized program for our inspection, and that was more.
So let's look at it from the different direction. If we don't do the SAFER program and find some other way, what do we lose?
Mr. Chairman, I would say continuity with other states and time lapse in getting inspections out the door, allowing people to conduct business. I think it would be a timing thing and really just trying to maintain consistency, making sure that the folks that are running these type of operations in Wyoming aren't at a disadvantage compared to other similar operators in the nation.
So you say a time lag. Is it going to be a day, 2 days, or 3 days? How significant of an impact would it be if we didn't do it in terms of time?
Mr. Chairman, I don't know if I can accurately predict, because that would be a whole system that we would have to that we would have to develop. I don't know what kind of delay that would be, but an additional consideration would be that this is for inspection of programs for which we receive federal delegated authority. So when we do our meat inspections, we're essentially ensuring the provisions of federal acts are carried out, and this is the system that they use. We need it to be able to maintain our equal to status. We have to have the same capacity and ability to track the inspections that we're doing and those products through a system to a degree that's at least equal to that of what USDA provides through their software system. This is their software system. That's why partially we're adopting or asking to.
Director, if I could go back to page 33, just on your narrative, for just a curiosity question in that, when they do bulk water inspections, is that like for delivery of water, or is that municipal water storage that they inspect?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, which inspections again?
Bulk water, it's down there on page 33. It's just on one of the inspections they do. They do meat plants, restaurants, bulk water, dietary supplements, yada, yada, yada.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Representative, those water samples are taken periodically at meat plants or other commercial food establishments for water quality checks, just to make sure that, particularly if they're running off a well or something like that, these bulk water samples are taken for water quality sanitary reasons.
Okay, go ahead, please proceed.
Okay. Let's see, where were we? Our next request, also in Consumer Health Services, can be found on page 36. This is a staffing request. This is one of those that we've had some increased demand for capacity and the number of inspections that we're doing. And to explain this a little bit, there was a meat plant in Hudson, Wyoming. It didn't require a full-time position for us to inspect at that time because they didn't run constantly, or our presence there wasn't demanded full-time. We have filled that role with an AWAC position. When we did the meat processing expansion grant program during the pandemic, that plant in Hudson transitioned from state inspection to federal inspection. So that position was no longer needed. Simultaneously, in Sublette County, we had delegated authority to Sublette County Health to do all of the inspections in their county. They did not rehire that inspector. So our initial plan was to take this AWEC position from Hudson, move it to Sublette County. We floated the job that way and we didn't get any applicants. So what we're trying to do now is shift around some duties. We know that the inspection load is a lot heavier now. This inspector would be doing not only meat plant inspections, but also commercial food establishments in Sublette County. And so we've had that increased demand of inspections in that county. This is a position that is mostly paid by USDA, but it would require some additional input from the state in order to make this a regular full-time inspector that's employed by the Department of Ag. And so that's the request that you find on page 36. The governor did recommend approval of this exception item.
Okay, please proceed.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. On page 41, we start our technical services division. We do have a couple of exception requests in this technical services division. The first of those can be found on page 43. Priority number 5 is a new laboratory balance. Now this is, it's a scale, but it's a very precise one. It goes all the way down to 1 microgram of precision. So it's a can weigh things that don't have very much mass to them. And the reason we're asking for this, this exception item is we need this scale to be able to maintain our accreditations for our weights and measures lab. And this scale isn't one that you can just and have them deliver that. They'll only manufacture these upon ordering. And so the scale that we're currently using is at the end of its effective lifespan. We can't get parts for it any longer, and it's no longer supported. So we would like to replace this, make sure we have the capacity of that type of measurement that is part of the weights and measures lab.
So just because it's past warranty doesn't mean it's past its lifetime. So my question is, number one, what's the order period? How long does it take, once you order one, how long does it take for them to get it to you? Is it a month? Is it 6 months? And then once you do get it, then presumably you'll have two machines until the old one breaks. So will that speed anything up, or you use them both, or what's the process?
Mr. Chairman, may I consult my expert?
Yeah. Okay, that's enough.
Mr. Chairman, I'm being told that we'll need to check to see how long it would take to get that. Once you order it, how long of a lag we're talking about.
And then when you do get it, what do you do with the old one? I mean, you continue to use it till it breaks down, or you?
Mr. Chairman, we would surplus that scale.
So becomes someone else's problem to fix. Go ahead.
So Director, it seems to me that that piece of equipment too would have to periodically be calibrated. And it may be that due to the age that they no longer service or calibrate that for accuracy. Is that a fair assumption?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, unfortunately, yes. That is fair.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, on page 44, also in the Technical Services Division, we have a request for some equipment maintenance. And what this is comprised of is two different kits of standard mass weights that need to be calibrated. They're supposed to be done every 10 years. That service interval is up for two different sets of weights that we have. So we have to send those out and get them cross-referenced and calibrated. That's one aspect of the request. The other aspect of this request has to do with liquid propane gas prover, two of them that we tow and go to service stations that sell LPG and make sure that the amount that they're selling matches the scale, the pump value. And so the problem with these two provers is that they're old and the hoses that are on them no longer meet DOT requirements. And so we need to replace the hoses on those provers and essentially bring them up to code.
Okay.
So that's the other aspect of the request.
Go ahead.
Director, you show that though, if I'm reading correctly, is an ongoing cost. That'd probably be a one-time cost, would it not? We're just recalibrating and buying the hose.
Mr. Chairman, Representative, one time.
Thank you.
Okay, go ahead. Please proceed.
Mr. Chairman, the next request for the Technical Services Division's on page 45. This one is an add-on to some inspection software that we have. It's a request that we would like the ability for our inspectors to be able to fill in their values on their portable devices when they're in the field. And then as soon as they come back into Wi-Fi service area, have that automatically uploaded so that they're not transcribing numbers and trying to update it that way. That's essentially what this request amounts to. It's add-on software that we're requesting for efficiency purposes in technical services. The governor did recommend approval of that budget
Questions?
request.
Seeing none, please proceed.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, our next unit is on page 49. This is the beginning of our analytical services lab. And we do have an exception budget request. It's our number 2 priority, and it's for equipment replacements within the analytical services lab. Our lab over in Laramie has a lot of different accreditations for different sampling methodologies. And a lot of them require a lot of precision equipment. You're gonna hear a common theme. Some of this equipment is no longer supported, hard to get parts for, not as precise as it once was. So the first one of these is a temperature monitoring system. This essentially alerts us when we have incubators that are not running at the temperature that they're supposed to, if they're not recovering fast enough. It also monitors walk-in coolers, freezers, high precision refrigerators, all temperatures within that lab. That's what this system does. We need to replace the one that's currently in the lab. That's the first request. The second one is another equipment replacement for a piece of equipment that's over 15 years old. This is specific to our pesticide residue testing program, pesticide program. It's a gas chromatography mass spectrometer. And again, it's one of those pieces of equipment that they've just stopped servicing.
I think I was here when you bought the last.
Mr. Chairman, we have more than one
Yeah.
GCMS in the lab. The one that we were here for last time was for the hemp program.
Okay, go ahead.
And unfortunately, Mr. Chairman, they all can't do everything. There's different levels of those. The third request, Mr. Chairman, is a dishwasher. Now, I hate using that term because it's not a Maytag from Lowe's. This is a.
That's what Representative Larson does at my house.
This is a. This one runs on reverse osmosis water. It runs at higher pressures, higher temperatures, higher volumes, and accommodates glassware that typically you would find in a lab with different types of rinse cycles and things that is much higher precision. We need it to maintain the accreditations of the lab. And then we also have other laboratory equipment that essentially breaks down to high precision refrigerators, freezers, and another one of these high precision balances for the lab that is just old equipment that we need to replace. The last one of these equipment replacements is a water analyzer for ammonia and total phosphorus. We get a lot of samples from wastewater treatment facilities and from conservation districts. This is a process that we used to do manually, or we still are doing manually. What we would like to do is there's a machine that does this and can keep up with our demand to conduct these tests and turn them around quicker. So that encapsulates the equipment requests for the lab.
Go ahead. Similar.
So Director, on your last one, on your water analyzer, it says that there's a service agreement that's required. And I'm just trying to get my head around that a little bit, because normally if you've got a new piece of equipment, there's a warranty time that they are obligated, the manufacturer is obligated to make sure that it's working correctly. There's typically an option for a service agreement, but certainly not required. And so I'm trying to understand, is this service agreement actually required, or is there an option that you would like to have? And just, can you help me through that a little bit?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Representative. It's an option. You wouldn't have to buy that service agreement. Is that correct? Okay, I want to make sure that I'm right here. But you invest so much money in this equipment, and it is so finicky that these are benchtop items that I would prefer our technicians are not trying to fix themselves to keep running. And so
That's the definition of ag, isn't it?
yes.
Well, Mr. Chairman, follow up. And so establishing that it's an option doesn't prohibit you the ability to call the dealer and tell them that it needs to be serviced and pay for that on an individual. The question always is on a service agreement, whether you're ahead to just call them when you need it, or fund that whole time. And so I'm just trying to,
Mr. Chairman, I understand the question. Yes, I think customers that have service agreements tend to get better and prompt service, where it has been difficult for us to get repair technicians to come in and look at equipment for which we don't have those agreements. Finding service technicians to come in and do that work has been problematic for us.
Okay, further questions? Please proceed.
Mr. Chairman, on page 56 is, oh, did I miss one? Sorry, I missed.
52?
Oh, yeah. Also in the lab, this is another one of the software system upgrades that we're requesting. About 10 years ago, we undertook a project to increase the accreditation level of the Analytical Services Lab, and we were able to do that. But part of the requirements for that is that we had to install a lab information management system, which provides some documentation on the QA/QC of the lab and traceability, chain of custody type of documentation for all of the samples that come into the lab. So that was a software installation that took place about a decade ago. And now it's one of those software pieces again that just needs updated to a newer version in order for us to maintain the capacity of the lab. And so it's another software request on behalf of the lab. And the governor did recommend approval of that exception request.
Please go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, are your lab people certified? Is there a certification for them that they can pass and be certified?
Mr. Chairman, Senator, hang on just 1 second while I ask specific to that LIMS system because I'm unsure. Is that okay? Mr. Chairman, Senator, I am told that to run this system, no certification is required, but training is.
So that means that the senator could run it if he wanted to.
Mr. Chairman, on the advice of counsel, I think I'll refrain.
All right, go ahead.
All right, Mr. Chairman, now on page 56, this is our Seed Lab program. We run this in collaboration with the University of Wyoming, and we have no exception budget requests for this unit or this biennium.
Okay, please proceed.
On page 59, the next budget unit is our groundwater state management plan. This is a program that we run on an agreement with the EPA, and we have no exception budget requests for this program.
Go ahead.
Our next budget unit is on page 62. This is Animal Damage Management Board specific to rabies. We have no exception budget requests for this program for this upcoming biennium.
Go ahead.
On page 64, this is also in that same program, but specific to rodent and predator control.
I thought that said rodent and senator control. I misread it.
Again, Mr. Chairman, I think it's best if I just I'll present the budget. There are no exception budget requests for this unit. On page 66, this is our grain warehouse program. We have no exception budget requests for this unit. On page 69, our next budget unit is our animal damage management program. This is specific to support of board activities and for research of that's conducted by ADMB. There are no exception budget requests for this program. On page 73 is our CHS food license program. We have no exception budget requests for this upcoming biennium for this program. Similarly, on page 77, this is our pool and spa license program. We have no exception budget requests for this program for the upcoming biennium.
This is Senator Driscoll's favorite section of your budget.
Mr. Chairman, it is popular with Mr. Chairman, on page 80 is our hemp production program. We have no exception budget requests for this program for the upcoming biennium.
So I'm curious, it says that there are 8 licenses, is that right? On the hemp producers. How much is actually produced volumetrically? Do we know? I mean, I'm just curious. We spent so much time and money to get this thing up and running and funded seed money.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, when we launched the program, there originally were 30-some applicators, and now there's only 8 left. That market's been extremely volatile for the past several years, and depending on what kind of agreements you have, it can be hard to sell that product. I'll take a look at our production numbers and get an answer for you, because I couldn't venture a guess as to
Yeah,
how
I'm
much.
just curious how much those 8 licensees produce.
We'll find out.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
following on that same line of thinking, as if the number of producers continues to decline and this program is expected to be self-sustaining, at some point, does the program shut down and we eliminate it? And then my next question to that is, it's my understanding that this large increase in the number of CBD and hemp shops we're seeing around the state is due to the legislation that was passed regarding hemp production. And so I'm not sure if that's entirely accurate, but that's what I've been led to believe. And so if the program shuts down for the production side of it, the 8 producers goes to 0, would that then by default shut down all of these shops? And then my final question to this would be, if the shops continue to keep operating, or we want to see them, if the general public wants to see them continue operating, do we need to start assessing a fee to those shops to make sure that they are paying to the agency to make sure the product that they are selling meets the requirements? A lot of questions there, but I'll just get them all out and let you start fighting your way through them.
Mr. Chairman, Representative, if the program goes to 0, I think it's important to keep in mind the role of the Department of Ag in hemp regulation compared to law enforcement. So our regulation of hemp stops at the farm gate and it stops at the processing gate in Wyoming. So we don't go into the retailers and sample those products to make sure they're compliant with the Controlled Substances Act, as an example. We test them on the farm and we test them at the processing facility. As I understand it, we don't have any claims that the product that's being offered for sale in those CBD retailers and hemp retailers is coming from any of our processing facilities domestically here in Wyoming. So if the number of hemp producers went to 0, I don't anticipate a big impact on the number of those dispensaries or retail outlets that exist in the state today. Does that help?
So do we know if any of those retail supplies are being tested in Wyoming?
Mr. Chairman, I don't, I'll check on our side to see if we're doing any of those samples. I don't believe we are, but I do think there have been some samples that have been submitted to check for different derivations of THC products that there's not a lot of regulation in this industry. So when something nefarious comes up and somebody submits a complaint, we might get a sample that way and ask to analyze that for what's in it. But as far as routine inspections, we're not undertaking those at the retail level. simply because that's not statutorily authorized by either state or federal statute for our management of the program.
But you're unaware of any other entity, law enforcement or whomever, that does any type of testing? on a
Mr.
routine
Chairman,
basis?
I've heard of some, but routinely, no, not aware.
Mr. Chairman. Kind of in the same line of questioning, the equipment that you purchased to get this program stood up, is it similar or the same equipment that law enforcement would use for this type of testing? To where if the program is declining, would it be advantageous to sell our equipment to someone else right now and close the program? Get some value back.
Mr. Chairman, Representative, yes, our analytical services lab is a DEA certified lab to run those type of products. And we do offer that service to law enforcement if they want to submit samples to our lab, and they do. We'll run those samples for a fee. And depending on value, yes, that program is supposed to be self-sufficient.
Representative Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On page 61, hold on. I'm on the wrong page. Sorry. Withdraw the question.
Okay, please proceed.
Mr. Chairman, on page 85, you'll find our next budget unit. This is our Natural Resources Services section unit, and we have no exception requests for the upcoming biennium.
Okay, please proceed. Oh, there's a question. You got to go faster, otherwise Lloyd catches up to his notes.
Yeah, that's right. That's the problem with having a slow holiday. You read all this stuff, right? When this natural resource division, they review, analyze, negotiate, and comment on these federal land plans and environmental impact statements and so on and so forth that you're heavily involved in, do you also participate? Do they participate in the public hearings, or do they participate in agency hearings?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, we try to have our policy staff at all of the meetings, whether they're public or cooperating agency only meetings, but typically we do gain cooperating agency status in negotiations with our federal counterparts for different land planning processes that take place. So we're involved at both levels.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, on page 90, we have our emergency insect management program. We have no exception budget requests for this budget unit. On page 93, we have our state lands weed and pest program. We have no exception budget requests for this biennium. On page 96, we have our pesticide registration fee program. Again, no exception budget requests for this biennium. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I could call up our manager of the Wyoming State Fair to run through our next budget unit.
So I do have a question on the leafy spurge. What I'm seeing, particularly in the center part of the state, is that it's taking over the hillsides, literally. I mean, you can see it from miles and miles away. And if you look at the hillsides below the timberline on the winds, I mean, every one of them is tinted into that color. I mean, so you know, the impression that, and some of the ranchers that I talked to up there, they just quit spraying because they can't keep up with it, and it just keeps going. So I'm just curious what your impression is, or if there's anything new on the horizon to address something like that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, Slade Franklin, Technical Services Manager, Department of Ag. Worked with Weed and Pest Coordinator for the last 17 years, so dealt a lot with the leafy spurge issue. Leafy spurge is a very difficult weed control, being that it is a perennial, has very deep roots, and we don't have a lot of great options on chemical control. The thing about leafy spurge is you have to do consistent control. I mean, it's honestly, you can't just do one treatment and walk away. You're talking about a long-term treatment management plan. But yeah, it's a very difficult one to control. Obviously, it has a lot of impacts on agriculture, and certainly we do a lot of cost share and grant programs on it, but it is one that we're trying to stay ahead of, but it's very difficult weed to control. I don't know if that answers your question, but.
Well, what I'm saying is we're not even close to staying ahead. It's getting bigger and bigger every year. I spray twice a year.
Right.
On my oaks place, but I can't keep up with, not even close.
Well, Mr. Chairman, one thing I always talk to the herbicide industry, they can find the golden ticket to leafy spurge. I mean, they've written their check basically, because there is a need across the West, not just Wyoming, in terms of management with that. And so we do need some new chemistry out there to help the problem.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, so we see,
Just 1 second.
so, sorry, Jim.
Go ahead.
So we see, Mr. Chairman, we see, as we try to control invasive plants across the state, that in some instances on federal lands that there's some resistance to participate and work on that. Do we feel like we have good participation with the federal folks on our public lands on leafy spurge?
Mr. Chairman, I would say, Representative, I would say the federal agencies are well aware of leafy spurge and are actually fairly good participants. Usually they're restricted in terms of funding within their agencies. So we're always looking at landscape scale projects that we can incorporate them so we get a better, long-term or landscape scale project to put together. I believe the federal agencies probably better in the last 10 years have recognized the importance of invasive species, especially since the cheatgrass issue. So they have been at the table, but budgeting is always an issue with them.
So follow up, Mr. Chairman. So there's just there's this concept in my, well, I don't know concept, but just this thought process in my head where as you go onto federal lands, they say you can't bring any invasive weeds, and there, you bring it in, then there's a fine, there's a responsibility. But if they don't manage them on theirs and it comes onto ours,
right? Yeah.
What recourse do we have any recourse?
Mr. Chairman, obviously under our state law, we don't have any recourse with the federal lands, but we do work with them on the weed-free forage program where they do restrict forage coming onto their lands that hasn't been certified as weed-free. Certainly is a good program for us as a state and them as a federal agency, but certainly doesn't help for a lot of those established weeds if they don't have the budget money to treat them. Thank you.
Okay. Oh, yeah, Jim? Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, if you turn your goat herd loose and they eat that leafy spurge, does it come back the next year from the roots, or do the goats pretty well clean it up?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Senator, goats do a very good job on leafy spurge, but there is an issue where you don't have enough goats to eat all the leafy spurge out there in some of those areas. So they're certainly well able to digest it and digest the seed better. But it's certainly not going to clean it out. You're always going to have, remnants from those establishments that you should at least follow up with a herbicide to take out.
Okay. All right, please proceed.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, committee members. I'm Courtney Conkle, and I have the pleasure of serving as the General Manager of the Wyoming State Fair. Today, I'm here to walk you through our 3-unit budgets, which consists of 0801, 0803. Yes, sir.
When you pull that closer to you, don't back away.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson, this is the first time all week I think anybody's accused me of being too quiet. So that's probably good for all of us. Mr. Chairman, committee members, we have 2 exception budget requests, both of which are housed within 0801, which is the first budget that we'll look at today for the State Fair. That begins on page 100. And the exception request is on page 103. Our first exception budget request was to add an additional team member to our operations team. Right now, the Wyoming State Fair consists of 137 acres, 60 structures, the State Fair event, And in 2023, we ran 479 event days. We currently have a team of 4 full-time operations members, and those are the folks that are responsible for the production of all of those events, the setup, the tear down, the janitorial, and then of course, the proactive and preventative maintenance efforts for our total property. So what we were looking to do would be to add an additional team member that would be on a Tuesday through Saturday schedule. We have over 200 events that take place on weekends, and that can be a challenge for our event runners if we don't have somebody on site or on staff that is able to work with them to make sure that their events are a success. I do stay on site. I'm on site on average about 40 weekends a year. So we have some level of staffing, but I also don't have the same skill set or capabilities as our operations team when there's certain things that need to be addressed. We were hoping to be able to expand hours, increase our ability to have after hours events, and of course have representation on the weekends to make sure that we are able to retain those large scale events that we've been able to bring to the Wyoming State Fairgrounds. Are there any questions about that first exception request?
So I do have a question. I see the number one that the governor denied the request. What I'm curious about is I think it would help us if we had a better understanding of how many volunteer hours and, you know, from the community, from your fair board, time and effort they put in. You know, it's not the same, but, you know, we have 1,000+ volunteers here in Cheyenne who put a lot of time in it. It's all voluntary to make Frontier Days work. So what do you guys do?
Mr. Chairman, that's an excellent question. We've actually been able to further develop our volunteer programs over the past few years. We do have the longstanding Fair Posse, and they work with us throughout the year, predominantly during fair time. This last year, they had 60 unique volunteers during fair, and they put in over 890 hours. Throughout the year, we've been able to create a volunteer series with one of our board members, Lori Boner, being the spearhead of that program, and she actually manages it. It launched last year, and in its first season, we saw over 2,000 volunteer hours. So we're working on that infrastructure. There are certain things that just due to liability purposes, we won't have our volunteer staff do. And some of those include chemicals or like large scale operation. If we're moving equipment, if we're doing panel setup, that are just a little bit too dangerous for us to be comfortable with our volunteers performing those particular tasks. But the volunteer efforts that we've been able to include over the past few years have already made a tremendous effort, and we're looking at expanding those for 24 and beyond.
Is Senator Boner one of those volunteers?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, he was.
Go ahead.
So Courtney, the governor gives you the ability to, and funds 110 of your 156 to do Series 900 and contract that out. So really the only thing he's pulling out is the benefits, IT and telecommunication. Would, as submitted, does this allow you to accomplish what you need? What's the advantage on having a full-time employee over doing it through the 900?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson, that's an excellent question. It does give us the ability to have additional infrastructure where we can bring on board a contractor or several contracts to be able to help support those needs throughout the year. I think the only challenge is that there's potentially a learning curve. Whereas if we're bringing on one person that's full-time, we could potentially bring on one contractor that is an individual that would be able to meet these needs for us. But if we are working with like a temp staffing entity or janitorial services entity, we may get different people from week to week or even day to day. And then that can hinder our ability to maintain our standards that we want to make sure that we're providing to every event year round.
You can follow up, Mr. Chairman. And then Courtney, if you could, as I was reading through your, you talk about the number of events and the days that are used, and that appears to have increased significantly. Could I ask that you maybe put together since, for maybe the last 5 years, 6 years, what those days of use have looked like, and just get it to us sometime? Just curious on that. It looks like things are, and then Mr. Chairman, at some time before you get done with your budget presentation, if you could just kind of give us an update on the projects that we funded for you to, on your CapCon requests and what you're trying to do there at the facilities. I'd appreciate getting an update on how that's going.
course, Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson, I will do that and get you something very soon.
Okay. Go ahead.
Our second exception budget request was also an additional staff member. So these were the two that we brought forward this year. Our goal was to be able to have 5 operations team members that are essentially floating team members. So they're able to do everything from event setup to preventative maintenance to minor to major repairs on grounds. And then we would have our head of operations and maintenance, which is our supervisor position, and an assistant supervisor position. Some of our intention with this was to be able to serve more events, have better efficiencies where we could flip the fairgrounds overnight, be able to set it up so we could hopefully increase the events by 100 to 150 events a year, which would get us into that 600 to 650 events range, which would be more than we've ever been able to accommodate. We would also be able to minimize overtime, but we would make sure that we're maximizing those guest services. And that's something that's been huge to us, to make sure that we're retaining that business that's coming in, both from in-state and from out of state, so that way we can be a better economic hub for the state of Wyoming and try to do our best to become as self-sustaining as we can possibly be.
Go ahead.
Courtney, do you get major maintenance funds? Okay, just, thank you.
So Corey, my question is, theoretically, if you get this person, then it will accomplish the goals you just explained. At some point in time, a year or 2 or 3, that position should become self-sustaining and pay for itself. Is that fair?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, that would be our goal.
So why wouldn't we just make it an AWAC position and see if it works before we fund a entirely new position, which is always kind of hard to get rid of, and require you to make it self-sustaining?
Mr. Chairman, I think that's a very valid idea, and I think we would be able to do that.
Okay. Okay, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, committee members, those are the extent of our 2 exception budget requests, both which are within 0801. Are there any additional questions regarding those 2 exception budget requests?
No, go ahead.
All right, walking through 0801, are there any additional questions within that budget? Everything else is our standard request. Hearing none, Mr. Chairman, we'll go to page 110, which is our non-fair budget. This is where all of our interim event revenues and expenditures are housed within, and there are no exception budget requests within this unit. And then finally, on page 112 is the State Fair Board budget. This is not a revenue generating budget, so this is exclusively expenditures which are for the Wyoming State Fair Governing Board. They are tasked to meet a minimum of 4 times a year. They host quarterly meetings, and then they are also generally on site for the duration of the Wyoming State Fair.
Go ahead.
Courtney, as I was reading that, I went on your website to see who was on the state board. I think maybe you could make that available.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson, what we're currently doing is getting their photos and getting everybody recompiled on our website. We did have a couple of new appointments that occurred in the last few months. And so we have that portion under maintenance with the goal to go live by our February 20th board meeting.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? All right, please proceed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next budget unit can be found on page 116. This is our Highway Weed and Pest Program. We have no exception budget requests for this program for this biennium.
Go ahead.
Director, how does that work? Do you then contract with the county weed and pest to get that done? It just seems like a wonky. YDOT gives it to you, you then give it to them. Am I tracking that correctly?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, that's correct. We have an agreement with the Wyoming Department of Transportation and we get funding from them. It comes over to the Department of Ag. We put that in with the other sources of funding that we use for weed control generally. And fold that into the allocation process. So those weed and pest districts can apply for different kinds of projects. Highway weed and pest being one of those types of projects they can apply for and we can fund.
Thank you. Okay, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On page 120, you will find our next budget unit. This is our predator management program. We do have an exception request for this program for this biennium. If you'll remember last year, we had a governor's letter for $1.4 million. And that was categorized as one-time only funding. And so this request is for $1.5 million for the upcoming biennium. What we're trying to do is stabilize the budget for those county predator management districts. It's been
Stabilized by meaning increase.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, that's correct. This is one of our most overprescribed programs, meaning we have a whole lot more application than we have money available to allocate. We do have a good program. It works well. It just needs a little more support.
Go ahead.
So as I read the narrative, it says due to difficult financial circumstances. Can you explain that to me? What does that mean?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, those predator management districts are special districts that are run by volunteers. A lot of them have agreements with USDA Wildlife Services. And so there's a lot of changes in the bill rate for the services that they provide. And most of those payments are made by the predator management districts. And aviation fuel, ammunition, firearms, and regular fuel has been a challenge for a lot of the predator management districts, particularly in the last several years. And so they've seen expenses go up drastically.
And so follow up, Mr. Chairman, it talks about that they're drawing down their account balances. And that may be okay, or it may not be okay. So could you get us a list of their account balances?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, we keep a current tally on that, and that would be easy for us to provide. We'll do it.
Would you do that?
Yep.
So just to follow up on that, on page 121, where you say the value of statewide livestock losses due to predation has increased 40%. Are you just saying that the price of livestock is up 40% from?
Mr. Chairman, we counted it on a money basis. So it would take a little bit of digging, but not a lot to determine, is that attributable to the price of livestock? Either way, we've seen an increase in the loss.
When you say, yeah, but inclusive, what is the increase? So what are you referring to? I guess we just need to know what that number means.
Mr. Chairman, we tabulate that, and I can get you the statistics on it's a money value, dollars.
So what's like just over the course of the past 10 years in terms of the number of livestock in Wyoming? Are we seeing an increase in head or a reduction in head? I think primarily we're talking about cattle and sheep. And so where do we stand in terms of just livestock counts?
Mr. Chairman, generally right now the counts are a little bit down as far as our state inventory of livestock. Prices have been high for the past couple of years.
So everyone's selling. Yeah.
Yep, that's correct.
And so when you say that the losses are up 40%, so that's a monetary thing. It's not in numbers, right? So I would like to know what the numbers are in terms of what the losses are and how that trend line, what that looks like.
Mr. Chairman, if memory serves me correct, those numbers are also up, but I do have specifics for that and can get you the numbers.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, go ahead.
When you're getting the numbers for that, would you also include what the predation was? Was it bears, wolves, or what were the major predators, please?
Or winter?
Mr. Chairman, those are reported by USDA National Ag Statistics Service, and there are reports that we can provide. We can get you the numbers. We'll do a whole summary of losses by monetary value, class of livestock, and any reported cause of loss all at once. That would be easy for us to do.
Okay,
Mr.
further
Chairman.
questions? Representative Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the page 122, Director at Justification and Consequences, the last line there looks incomplete, but relative to the information you're looking to provide, could you let us know the areas related to predator management where you see potential further success given this additional, this 1.5 request, please?
Yeah, you want to finish that sentence for us?
Yeah, we can do that.
All right, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Moving along, page 125. This is our next budget unit. This is Wyoming Beef Council. There are no exception budget requests for this budget unit for the upcoming biennium.
Please proceed.
On page 130, you will find the Wyoming Wheat Marketing Commission. Also, there are no exception budget requests for this program for the upcoming biennium. The Dry Bean Commission is our next budget unit on page 135. There are no exception budget requests for this program. And finally, Mr. Chairman, on page 139, this is our Leaf Cutter Bee program. There are no exception budget requests for this program for the upcoming biennium.
Okay. That wasn't so bad, was it?
Mr. Chairman, that wasn't so bad at all. I'd be happy to answer any questions that any of the committee has on the
Any other
overall.
questions? Go ahead, Representative Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Regarding the dried beans, it looks like there's an increase in expected revenue from, up to 300,000. Is that right? 300,000? I just wondered what's the source of the expected increase?
That's a check. Mr. Chairman, that is what we would refer to as a checkoff program. So that's just how the budget was set, and the revenue that actually comes in will be based on how many of those producers and warehouses we have that pay into it.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Representative Larson.
Two questions, if I may, Mr. Chairman. And it was intrigued me, the leaf cutter bee thing, and as I just read that in, but do we have any similar type of oversight for honeybees and the interstate movement of those and health and anything? Is there any regulation on those?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, we do have regulations for other bees as well, and what we require is that you let us know where those bees are going to be, and so we can maintain separation between hives because of disease transmission concerns. Other aspects, Slade, that you're aware of on bees? So yeah, we inspect those hives that are coming in as well. And we can x-ray bees if somebody is interested in diagnosing problems with different hives.
And then my follow-up, Mr. Chairman and Director, is Courtney to kind of give us an update on what you've done with those projects that you've started that we've kind of been funding with CapCon. Just if you can give us a brief summary of how that's going.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson. Over the last 4 years, we've been working on a master plan that rolled out in January of 2020. There were 52 projects that were identified in that master plan, and year to date, we have in progress 32 of those 52 projects, which has been a lot. It's been really, really rewarding. We've been aggressive. There's been a lot of preventative and deferred maintenance on our grounds that we've been able to address, as well as some projects that are helping us to maximize our ability to generate revenues. And we're currently in the process of finalizing an RFP with the construction department to go out to bid for 10 more projects to be completed in 2024. Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson, one thing to add to that, I'll also send that detailed breakdown of each project and sort of the progress report of where we're at with each of those that have been a part of the 2020 master plan.
Mr. Chairman.
Please, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Mahmoud, for your Cheyenne office folks anyhow, what is your telework, remote work policy and how does that work for you?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, we don't telework at the Department of Ag. It's one of those things that we've noticed with the customer base that we serve. There's an expectation that we're available face to face. And so that's just how we manage it.
Thank you.
Okay, any further questions? Senator Grove.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Morning, Director.
Good morning.
And this can be an offline answer, but I know, predator control and weeds, noxious weeds or the weed spraying programs. There's a lot of money all throughout the budgets and the counties and whatever for these programs. Is there a place you could point me? Like I say, you can answer this offline, but a place you could point me where I could find a total number for each of those two segments, what the counties are raising, what the state, what we're doing. I see what we're doing. I see it in the budget, but I know when I get my taxes, I'm paying for weed and pest control money in my county, and we have a aggressive program. But where could I go get that?
Mr. Chairman, Senator, that is data that is submitted to us in the form of an annual report. It'll take some compilation for us to put it together on a statewide basis. Each of those weed and pest districts might be funded slightly different based upon mill levy authorities within those individual counties, but that is something we can put together and submit.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, so we're an hour ahead of schedule. Let's take a short break and we'll allow UW to come in. I think we'll start with SER. Is that agreeable? That might be a little shorter, so. You want to let them know, Mike? Okay, welcome back. And as people slowly migrate in, we're going to start with SER. So welcome, good to see you. Happy holidays and post-holidays. Fire away. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Madam Co-Chairman, and members of the Joint Appropriations Committee. I'm Holly Krutka, Executive Director of the School of Energy Resources. Joining me today is not Cindy Crane. She is still on a plane because we're ahead of a schedule, but she is trying to be here. She's the CEO of Pacific Corp and she's Chairman of the Energy Resources Council. She sends her regards. Also joining me is Representative Burkhart, Chairman of Minerals Committee, and a member of the Energy Resources Council. And of course, Senator Anderson is also on the Energy Resources Council, which is the governance board for the School of Energy Resources. From SER, I have Scott Quillinen, Senior Director of Research, and Trina Pfeiffer, who is the Director of the Center for Carbon Capture and Conversion. So we have two handouts we provided, one on our governance model and structure. I'm not going to talk about it because you have that, but I'm happy to answer questions. And also a handout that explains our largest single ask, which I'll talk about later related to coal-derived asphalt. So SER's model is unique across the nation. I believe the model is a significant part of why we're able to be so successful. And if you'll allow me just a few minutes to explain and celebrate some of our successes from the last year, we're really proud of what's been accomplished. And again, this is just a few select things. In FY23, SER supported 259 faculty, staff, and students across the University of Wyoming to focus on Wyoming-specific energy issues. Of that 259 individuals, 50 of those were full-time staff at the School of Energy Resources. 22 of that 50 have been hired in the last 12 months. So we've had an unprecedented growth, and I'll explain where that growth is coming from. With that unprecedented growth, all of these individuals live and work here in Wyoming, with the exception of one individual on the East Coast who couldn't relocate due to family health issues. But he is paid, he's working on financial management of our federal grants, and he's paid completely on non-state funds. We don't expect to hire anyone outside Wyoming for any future hires. And we do feel it's part of our role to bring expertise to Wyoming and create high-paying jobs here. Of SER's full-time staff members, we're proud that over 75% have at least one degree from the University of Wyoming, and many are Wyoming natives. So a few major outcomes. SER's partner, Frontier Carbon Solutions, obtained Wyoming's first 3 Class 6 permits. And I know you all know, but for members of the public who may not be familiar, Class 6 is the type of permit you need to inject CO2 for permanent storage. We've been doing that a long time in Wyoming for enhanced oil recovery. So this is the permit just for storage. This is a really exciting development that has been decades in the making. And it's not just SER's success, of course, or Frontier Carbon Solutions, but that of the Department of Environmental Quality, Enhanced Oil Recovery Institute, the Geologic Survey, the Oil and Gas Commission, Conservation Commission, and more. Industry, we have a new industry moving forward in Wyoming. It's a really exciting time to be here. SER's team has completed first in Wyoming subsurface testing of the 2 carbon storage wells that we drilled and completed to Class 6 standards adjacent to Basin Electric's Dry Fork Power Station in Campbell County. We took over operation of the Integrated Test Center, also in Campbell County. Our carbon engineering program focused on high volume uses for Wyoming coal is moving out of the lab off campus and into the demonstration phase, and I'll talk about that later. To support Wyoming oil and gas, we launched phase 2 of the Maui project. That was funded by this body. It brings together 13 projects, 7 departments, 20 faculty and research staff, and 20 PhD students, all working together to train students and unlock Wyoming's largest unconventional oil and gas reserve. In that program, we've worked really closely with the Enhanced Oil Recovery Institute and the State Geologic Survey, and just want to acknowledge they helped us design the program and review proposals. Over a 12-month period, the School of Energy Resources applied for well over $100 million of external competitive funding. Out of that, over $95 million was awarded. The numbers, we're still finalizing some of those projects, meaning we're in negotiations with the funder, most usually the Department of Energy. But I can tell you now that the state has a better than 4-to-1 match on those. So over 80% of those dollars of that 95 million are non-state dollars coming to Wyoming to undertake novel energy work. We've never done anything at that scale before in 1 year. So just want to highlight that success. The topics for that funding range from CO2 storage, creating hydrogen with produced water. And if you know about oil and gas, produced water is a huge problem, very costly. Nuclear cost reductions, building nuclear capacity, and more. We also re-energized our Center for Energy Regulation and Policy Analysis, and that's led by Kara Fornstrom, who's here today. Their work was slowed by truly an onslaught of federal proposed regulations targeting the energy sector. They've spent a lot of the last year supporting Wyoming elected and appointed officials to respond to those rules, but they've also started publishing some really great work and encourage you to look at that. Our outreach program brought in internationally recognized speakers like Harold Hamm and Alex Epstein and ran several major conferences, and our academic program saw a major uptick. So just a few things that have happened in the last year. There's so much more and so much to be excited. And I just want to acknowledge we have a lot of folks in the room or who were intending to be in the room if we were at 1 p.m. That have been a big part of this. So just grateful for our collaborators from industry and across the state. So moving to our requests, they start on page 72 of the budget book. On page 72, column 4, total department exception requests should be changed from 20 million to 23 million. I'm going to explain this as related to our second budget item. So I will talk about that in just a minute. SER's first priority is on page 73, and it's an increase in our standard funding, which our standard funding is like a block grant for the School of Energy Resources. It funds our day-to-day activity. If you choose to appropriate this $2 million per biennium into our standard budget, we intend to use those funds to increase personnel to focus on rare earth element, basically not the geologic side, but the extraction, creating those into products, so high value manufacturing, as well as new products for Trona and potentially process optimization associated with Trona process controls. Those are very aligned skill sets. So we're looking at a couple tenure track faculty, a couple folks at the School of Energy Resources, and then we also have additional funds in there, very minor, for outreach and administration support. Given how much we've grown, we really need to expand our administrative support just a little bit. Okay, SER's second request is on page 74. It's 17 million for solvent extraction to make asphalt binder from coal. We provided a 1-pager on this ask because it is a big project and it's a little complicated. So on that page, you can change, this is where that increase of 3 million came from. You can change the 14 million to 17 million. And let me explain what happened. And let me give you a little background before I do that. So Wyoming has been funding SER to develop a coal refinery since 2017. We've been very closely working with the College of Engineering and Physical Sciences. And they've been doing a lot of the research in this work, as well as other partners I'll mention later. The program as a whole is focused on high volume uses for Wyoming coal. What else can we do with this incredible reserve we have? There's 2 processes we're looking at and lots of different products. The processes are pyrolysis and solvent extraction. The pyrolysis work is ready for the demonstration phase. This demonstration is funded. Procurement is happening now and construction will start very soon. So the $17 million request is focused on solvent extraction. And so solvent extraction we use to make what's called asphalt binder. It's the sticky glue that holds asphalt together. And I apologize to my YDOT colleagues in the room who, that was probably oversimplification. But we're partnered with YDOT and Western Research Institute in Laramie and the Wyoming Innovation Center on this project that's in Campbell County. And Senator, you can go ahead, and we have 2 samples. So you can pass those around. The one with the green stripe is the coal-derived asphalt, and these were made by YDOT, and the other is typical asphalt, conventional asphalt. So we're really excited about this particular technology and this product for a number of reasons. So the way asphalt binder, and again, that's that glue, the way it's made today is it uses heavy oil residuals from refineries. But asphalt demand in the US is growing at about 3.6% per year, and refinery capacity is decreasing. So we have feedstock problem. So the international or the US market is about 25 million tons per year. International market's about 140 million tons per year. This is a high priced item. Historical prices have ranged anywhere from $600 to $900 per ton for the binder. They're higher than that now. So in FY23, you can get on YDOT's website and see what they paid. It was about $900 to $1,100 per ton for the binder. So those prices have climbed versus historical, and they are just very volatile. Coal drive asphalt binder has several advantages versus conventional asphalt binder. So, and for example, has lower greenhouse gas footprint. We think we can help it get into market. Wyoming coal has very low sulfur, so it doesn't smell if you've ever driven by asphalt being laid down, and it might have some health benefits for the workers that are actually placing it. So we're really excited about that. If we can successfully commercialize this technology, there's 4 different ways the state of Wyoming will benefit. One is the severance taxes associated with the incremental coal production. 2 is sales and property taxes if a commercial facility to do this high value add manufacturing is actually built here in Wyoming, which that would be our goal. And that would make sense because you would prefer to transport a higher value item, right? If you're paying $30 for rail, that makes a really big difference if you're selling coal at $12 a ton versus asphalt binder at $900 per ton or $1,100 per ton. So it's a much smaller percentage. And again, this is an international market. In addition, the intellectual property for this technology is held by the University of Wyoming, so licensing fees could come to the university. And while it's not revenue, it's worth noting this could provide a stable source of asphalt binder for YDOT that has a stable price. Coal prices are very, very stable compared to oil prices.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, assuming this all were to work, what would be the permitting hurdles to create a coal binder refining plant in the state of Wyoming?
Permitting hurdles for the actual plant itself and not the asphalt binder to be used?
The plant that would create the binder. You know, we have if today it's traditionally, Mr. Chairman, apologies, is an oil refinery for generically speaking. And so it would take some sort of a commercial scale refining facility to get that. Would there be significant federal permitting hurdles to make that happen versus doing it in the test environment we're doing it in today?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Walters, that's a great question. So I don't think we would be looking at the kind of permitting associated. We call it a coal refinery, but it's much more simple than all the distillation columns you would see at oil refinery. We are working on technologies to essentially capture the CO2. So there will be CO2 emissions from this plant, but the team is working on all the different technologies, but there would be normal permitting associated with any kind of large scale manufacturing. And there would be like a stack unless we capture there would be a stack, a chimney. So traditional permitting requirements, and we can do some work on more specifics, but it wouldn't be the same level as an oil refinery. Okay.
Holly, this has been really interesting to watch because it's something that's just developed in the last few years as we've seen a shift from the traditional uses of coal. And so we've stepped up to the plate to protect those industries that has brought Wyoming as far as it has. And so with this is everything. I just want to make sure all of the tests that you've run thus far have proven to meet or exceed the standards or expectations that are required for asphalts. And then is there anybody else pursuing a similar type of research And where are they compared with what you're doing?
Okay. So this is the sample size that we've been testing today, and that has performed well versus it has performed at the level that is needed to be deployed. What we really need is a test road to be able to test under real world conditions and extensive freeze thaw with cars driving on it. So we've been working, YDOT is testing our samples for us because they're the experts in what is needed to actually deploy this. To answer your question, yes, others are looking at this. We're not the only ones that have noticed there's a feedstock problem here. In fact, that one pager that I provided references a report. Some of my numbers I'm using in terms of market scale are from a report by Alberta Innovates, which is kind of not affiliated with the university in the way we are, but somewhat similar to SCR, and it's an energy institute researching for the state of Alberta or the province of Alberta. And they are targeting creating asphalt binder from their tar sands, so their oil sands, whereas we are targeting coal, which aren't actually that different. But so we are not the only ones looking at this market. There is a race and there is a time component to this, but we do think we have some real advantages for our product. And as for how we compare to them, I actually don't know the answer to that. I'm not sure how their product is performing, but we could certainly do some more research and get back to you if you'd like.
So my question is on the 17 million, how much is the total project that you have in mind going to cost, and whatever the matching dollars are for that? And what you say it's a partnership with those other entities.
Yep.
Just describe the partnership. Who's paying for what and doing what?
Mr. Chairman. Okay, perfect, because that was my next point. So if you'll allow me, I'm going to describe why we're changing the price, and I'm going to get into all that. So we had originally had a $21 million project, which we were asking $2 from the state to $1 of non-state. So we were going to ask for 14 million. That's where that 14 million for the state came from. And then we had 7 million that was going to be non-state. Out of that 7 million, 5 million was to the federal Department of Transportation. And 2 million was from industry, which specifically was Peabody. They provide 1 cent per ton of coal to the School of Energy Resources to do whatever we feel is important. We do some carbon storage work with that, and we're planning on using some of that funding to support this project. The morning of our budget hearing with the governor, we found out that the federal Department of Transportation grant wasn't funded. We've had a lot of success in our federal grant writing over the last year, but we just cannot get anything for coal. And where this technology is and its technology readiness level, generally it would be the feds that would support that. And so we felt really good about our proposal, but it wasn't funded. So what we did was strip down our $21 million project to a $19 million project. So we took out anything we didn't think, like federal reporting requirements and some of the stuff they were going to make us do that isn't necessary to commercialize the technology. We still currently have $2 million of industry funds. Although we do have industry interested, I think they'd be more likely to invest after this step, after we have the demonstration, because then we can really narrow down on the final costs for our product. And I will just say, while this level of technology readiness is generally funded by the federal government, we cannot get money. It's hard to get money for fossil fuels. It's impossible for coal. They've just down the line decided not to fund that. So if we want to do this demonstration, we need 17 million from the state. We will still have the 2 million from industry. We'll continue looking for more from industry. But our big goal from our industry partners is to get them to license the technology and commercialize this. You know, asphalt companies is very low margin industry, and Wyoming is what the state has the most to gain from this being commercialized. So let's see, I already talked about that. Let's see. So that's really, I mean, we do have a little bit of industry funding. We were kind of caught off guard by the federal decline in our grant application. So that's where we are, is we have 2 million from industry now. And we're we're trying to continue getting more, but I think the state has a lot to gain here.
Holly, if you would you, it seems to me whenever we get to a demonstration project, like we're seeing with our nuclear, it's a much larger scale than what we do up to that point. And so now we've got this nuclear plant that's several $billion. And so we look at this demonstration project and we need to do a section of road.
Mm-hmm.
But how do we get the volume of product in order to make the asphalt to get to that? Because right now you're in a laboratory, so to speak, generating this smaller volume of liquid. But to pave a road, it seems to me that you're going to have to increase your ability to extract, if you will, or process and get the fluids to then have the volume to make the asphalt that then you can make the road, which would appear to me, and it always is in research, that one-time funding to get it in there is pretty expensive. But it seems to me that equipment to process it is going to consume a significant amount of your request, unless I'm seeing that wrong.
No.
So if you could elaborate on that.
That's exactly right. So, okay, if this is funded, if you choose to fund this, here's what we can do. Here's the deliverables. Site preparation and the demonstration of the equipment to make the asphalt binder will occur at the Wyoming Innovation Center. So we'll do site prep, procurement of the equipment, construction of the demonstration, operation of the demonstration for many months to create enough of the binder to create a test strip of road that would be at least half a mile long. I think that's the minimum we would target so that we can test it under real conditions. And the other thing we're getting is, so we're testing the road. We're also building this equipment to understand and operating it. We can understand the actual costs so that we can take that to commercial partners and try to essentially market the technology for potential licensees. So this would be the last step before we could get a commercial partner. We would hope that would license it and take it to commercialization, but we can't test the road strip with what we can produce now. We're bigger. I wouldn't call what we're doing now lab scale. We call it pilot scale or bench scale. It's a larger facility, but it's not enough to build a road. So we need this to be able to test at that scale.
What's the timing?
So the timing is, let's see, on the back page of your handout. So everything in red on that handout, procurement would start in, let's see, this year in 2024. The road would be constructed in Q2. This is calendar year, not fiscal year of 2026. And then we would continue with that performance testing through 2028, but we would already have the data we need to start marketing the technology. That would be, obviously roads, you want them to last more than a year or two. So we would continue that monitoring for years after that as well.
So then what's your spending rate? In other words, if we gave, you're asking for 17, if we gave 7 for 2025, 24, and then 7 for 25, and does it, what works?
The procurement of the equipment is more, it's a little more than 7 million. I would just feel really concerned about buying equipment that I knew I didn't have the money to put together and operate. So to answer your question, procurement starts in early, let's see, at this year, 2024. So
how much do you need the first year?
So I'm sorry, say that one more time.
How much of the 17 do you need in year one?
Well, we would need probably at least in the first year to start the 8 to 10 in the first year, because it is the equipment that is the expensive items. You've already funded in detailed engineering, so we can move to procurement pretty quickly here. So.
Okay.
So to do the demonstration project, what volume of liquid or solvent what's the volume of solvent that you'd need to have extracted to do that? And how much coal would it take to get that accomplished? Is the coal industry willing to participate in kind with coal to do that? And is there a section of road that YDOT is willing to use this on, and are they willing to participate?
So, Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson, YDOT's in the room. I'm not going to speak to them, but they are our partner in this project, and they are certainly, well, I'm not going to speak for them. If it's okay, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to have Trina, do you know the volume of coal for the demonstration project? Or order of magnitude. No, it was. Oh. Ballpark. Do you have order of magnitude?
No, I do, but I can't remember. I'm sorry.
Okay, we'll get it to you then.
I can't remember. I'm so sorry.
And this would be done where, Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Chairman, this would happen in Campbell County at the Wyoming Innovation Center.
You turn that road into a waste track? Is it going in circles?
I will ask my friends at YDOT if they would like to build a racetrack.
And then you're going to, Mr. Chairman, and then it seems as though you'd have to have the capacity to store that solvent until you have enough in through that period of time, right? So
Correct.
that comes in with the equipment.
That is all part of what we call our demonstration.
It seems to me if you made it a circular or looping a road and you're a half mile, it'd be a lot easier to do a weight test on it as opposed to just going back and forth.
Mr. Co-Chair?
Go ahead.
Really exciting research here and ideas. Certainly, I think the focus of this research project is understanding how Wyoming can maximize its asset of coal resources, right? And how to pivot from traditional energy usage. But when it comes to asphalt production or creation or usage, is there any other competitors unrelated to coal? I mean, because asphalt creation and concrete creation is so heavy on carbon emissions, what other alternatives are currently being researched in the industry that may eclipse our wonderful idea of utilizing coal?
Madam Co-Chair, great question. So I already mentioned Alberta Innovates and they're looking at their tar sands. Our biggest competition is international crude, especially that heavier crude from international. So that's the other point that I didn't make, is this provides an American domestic feedstock. Whereas some of America's oil production is lighter crude that doesn't really produce that much from the refinery to support asphalt. So really what we're doing is competing internationally, and don't forget that the focus on greenhouse gas emissions varies internationally. And so while it's been a big target and focus of this current federal administration, that's not the case everywhere in the world. So we're actually competing with just traditional asphalt from heavy oil production.
And Mr. Co-Chair?
Go ahead.
A follow-up on that. And this is just long-term viability. If even the technology works, it appears to be somewhat of an, and I may be mistaken here, but it appears to be a niche market potentially of who is using coal for a binder in asphalt production. And as a result of that niche market, assuming that's true that it's a niche market, then are we really struggling to compete in the overall international commercial market space for asphalt as it relates to quality control and testing? Because I'm assuming how you test for asphalt production using oil as a binding agent as opposed to coal is different. And so I'm just wondering, and I appreciate the aspirational components of research and development and moving into these spaces, but just, is it a prudent decision? I'm assuming you think it is, and that's why you're at the table, but more further conversation about that and just how maybe niche it potentially may be.
That's a great question. Very fair, Madam Chairman. So we wouldn't be asking if we thought it was a niche market, because the main thing we're focused on School of Energy Resources is how to provide that incremental revenue back to the state. So if it's just a niche market, we wouldn't be able to do that. And we would target international markets as well. And quite at the end of the day, we have to meet specs and we have to compete on price. And we think we can. So, but you're right, it's research. So, but I don't think we would call it a niche market.
I have the answer to.
Okay, Madam Chair.
So sorry, Chairman. Okay, so it's 30 to 40 tons of solvent, which basically translates to 300 to 400 tons to make the road.
So on your weight of the solvent, so I'm going to go to liquid. So how many barrels would that equate to? Do you have a feel? And then you said how many tons of coal?
300 to 400 tons.
Tons of coal. Okay. So then in this process, and I don't know which one of you want to answer, because I think folks listening and stuff, and as we talk about coal, there's this process, then there's going to be, what do we do with the remains? So in this process, what comes out the back end? And is it hard to dispose of? Is there any concerns with that type of residual amount? So could you just walk us through that and then how it would be disposed?
So the residual, basically, we are going to put that through the pyrolysis unit and make coal char out of it. So there isn't a whole lot of residual there.
Right on time.
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, the question's been brought up if there's a lot of competitors for this coal asphalt. One of the competitors is concrete, cement, which that industry is having the same problem that asphalt is having. They can't keep up with the demand. And worldwide that's true, but we really have a problem in the US because we can't get the resources. The natural resources were blocked by the federal government to open up a new mine or anything like that. So we have competitors, all right, but they don't have any advantage on us at all. So there's no black swan out there that's gonna come and do us in. Thank you.
Okay, further questions on the 17 million?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to build on the question earlier. All in, all done. What's the number that's needed for the next year?
Okay, so for the first year, we would mostly be focusing on procurement and construction. We think it's 8 to 10. But again, I'm just going to urge caution with giving us money that we can't actually finish the project. So, okay. Mr. Chairman, then SCR.
Mr. Chairman, so I think the answer is 17 million.
Oh, so
It's not 10, not 9, it's 17 million is what's needed. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Chairman, SCR's third request, I'm ready to move on to that one, is 2 million in matching funds for philanthropic giving to the School of Energy Resources. This is dollar for dollar, one-to-one matching funds, no in kind. And that is on page 75.
A minimum of 1-to-1.
The what?
This is a minimum of 1-to-1.
Minimum.
Theoretically,
Correct,
you can get
sir.
4-to-1.
Correct. Minimum. And SCR's final request is on pages 75 and 76. That's 2 million for continued nuclear capacity building at UW. So what we mean by capacity building, essentially when the TerraPower project was announced, UW did have work around the geologic side of uranium, but not much else in nuclear. Our students really didn't have access to a lot of coursework around nuclear energy, and now we have this first of the kind demonstration coming to Wyoming. We did not think it would be prudent to try to build a whole nuclear engineering program at several tens of millions of dollars, but we do think we need to step up our game a little bit. And so the legislature appropriated $2 million for capacity building. To date, that has leveraged $2.4 million from the Department of Energy, Nuclear Regulatory Commission, Idaho National Lab, that one's cash and in kind, and the private sector. And we've stood up the Nuclear Energy Research Center, which is very multidisciplinary, led by Caleb Hill in chemistry, Tara Rigetti in law. We have started UW's first Fundamentals of Nuclear Energy course. We're building a lab focused on fuel work that would be a shared facility for faculty and research staff at UW. And then led by Director Fornstrom in her role at the Center for Energy Regulation and Policy Analysis, and working with the College of Business, we've been undertaking and started to publish Wyoming-specific economic impact studies that explain how different sectors of the nuclear energy industry would benefit the state of Wyoming. And so essentially just providing that information to help us understand where it's prudent to invest, where should we focus our resources as we build up this new industry. If you opt to support this second tranche of capacity building at UW, we would undertake the same kind of work, also see grants for faculty. And one of the things, it's really important to support faculty and researchers as they transition to a new area. So supporting kind of C grants, student funding, things like that. So that would be, we would continue that work if you choose to fund that fourth request. So that brings me to the end of SCR's request. I really appreciate your attention today, and thank you.
So I'm looking at page 76 of the denial from the Chief Executive's office, and I'm just curious if there were specific reasons towards dollar amount or just the issue, or what the, so Kevin, if at some point, if you get back to us, you don't have to do it right now.
Mr. Chairman.
Or Eric. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On that request, Director, if we don't fund the 2 million, if we go with the governor's recommendation of denying the 2 million request, how does it affect or impact what you already have going moving forward?
Great question. So I would say our nuclear work on campus is at a delicate stage. We do have some momentum, and it would slow that down, but we know we have to, at a minimum, prepare our students to be able to work in this industry, or those who choose to be interested. So I would say it would slow us down, and we would lose some momentum, but we definitely will try to figure out what we can continue to do to keep it going.
Don, any comments on this, on your thoughts, or what your committee did with regards to these types of requests?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. Thoughts from the Minerals Committee?
Correct.
Mr. Chairman, we did not address any of these. I'm here as a member of the Energy Review or Resource Council, which has analyzed these. And I'll start with the coal asphalt. My recollection is there are only 7 refineries left in the United States that are producing asphalt. If any of those close, that takes 1/7 of the market off the table. A lot of the refineries here in Wyoming are using foreign crude, but they are not producing as much asphalt. They put a coker in and they break the asphalt down and sell it as diesel fuel and gasoline. So there is a market here, I think nationally, even internationally, for the asphalt. It's proving whether it'll hold up as well as regular asphalt. If you look at some of the road projects, I think everyone's noticed YDOT has gone to concrete instead of asphalt because frankly, at times, concrete has been cheaper than asphalt. There is a market there for it. It just needs to be proved out that you can combine coal asphalt and overlay it on traditional asphalt and have it bind so it doesn't peel off, that it'll hold up as well. Coal tar is not something new. This use is new. Coal tar has been around for 100 years. Came out of some of the original coal production and work done on coal. I think all of us can remember the term coal oil, which was used in lanterns. Coal tar was part of that. So I think it's a viable option for our coal industry. I would hope they would support it to sell more coal. It's another option that we have on selling our coal in a different way. And some of the coal products I think are very worthwhile. This is one that I think we should continue to pursue. It is research, but I'll go to UW School of Business. Dr. Alexander produced a report called Fiscal Forecast, where Wyoming's research we're now 8th in the nation in the amount of private research money that is put into research in Wyoming. And that report indicates that engineering, STEM jobs, STEM industries are all growing in Wyoming, and that is really a bright spot for the future. So I think this goes along with that. With the licensing, the technology, you can easily say, we'll license it, but you have to build it in Wyoming. And then I think that's another option.
So
But I think
I'm curious, Don, why Minerals hasn't taken a deep dive on this. Is it a timing issue? Because, you know, all we do is throw money around.
Mr. Chairman,
It's
we
nice.
were kind of limited on our interim topics. We've had
When is that?
presentations on it from management and concentrated on those interim topics that management asked us to work on was one of the reasons. That doesn't mean we're unfamiliar with the subject. It just means that was not a concentration during the interim.
Co-Chairman Nicholas?
Go ahead.
Representative Burkhart, thanks for being here. Question, you just mentioned a statistic that we're now 8th in the nation for private dollars. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that, please?
Did you identify the fact that we are 8th in the nation for receiving private dollars?
Yes. Dr. Alexander's report is available. And research STEM businesses and that. Dr. Alexander indicated that those are all really bright spots in the economic future for the state. Kind of a surprising finding in her report. And it's, like I said, it's readily available and really paints a very nice picture of the state's move into STEM industries here in Wyoming. If
So
you want.
follow up, Mr.
Please.
Co-Chairman. So kind of on that point and on the discussion of losing the federal grant dollars, but it sounds like we do have at least one company of private interest into this project. But I do find that a bit surprising that there's only one, particularly with Wyoming's strong loyalty and support of coal, that you think that they would be coming to the table a little more positively in order to support our efforts to support their industry. Can either of you provide any explanation on behalf of our beloved coal companies in the great state as to why they're not coming up to the table with any other funds, with the exception of one company?
Madam Chairman, I think that's a great question. I mean, for any one company to support this specific effort, you know, we don't know where this coal could be purchased from any of the companies. I think maybe your question is more general. Why are they not all supporting us in this way? And I will just say that we're in discussions with several of them to try to see if they would step up as Peabody has. So, and we've had some improving discussions, but so I can't speak on behalf of the companies.
Mr. Cook,
Madam Co-Chair?
just a comment. I do want to recognize Peabody for being a partner with the state and thank them for their contribution. And my, message out to their sister companies to support this effort. Representative Burkhart, go ahead.
Madam Chair, if I might add to that, the current asphalt's being produced by the oil companies. I can understand where they don't want to jeopardize their market, so to speak, at this time. So they wouldn't be supporting it. But again, I think the coal companies should. I think the asphalt industry as a whole should be supporting it more. That's another thing of outreach to get those people involved in this.
Madam Co-Chairman, if I could add to that. So just because there's this feedstock gap, I do want to, this is not oil versus coal. Like we have a feedstock problem. And so we can have both in the mix. I do want to acknowledge Arch gave us committed to $500,000, but they wanted it spent in a different area, which is CO2 storage and reclamation work. But so they were also supporting us. So we will continue to go back to them yet, and others, but we have had some support in other areas as well. So, And as far as the asphalt companies, I will say part of that is we've started working more closely with Western Research Institute. They're not energy companies. We don't know them very well. So we've had to start building that up and maybe honestly just are at the earlier stages of that. So we just don't have those connections given that they're not actually in the energy sector.
Mr. Chairman.
Please go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, with all due respect to the other industry personnel, Holly, we have not really pursued them until we could secure our funding. Once we secure our funding, yes, then there might be other coal companies or whatever companies that would jump on the bandwagon, don't you think?
Sure. Well, I can't speak for them. Mr. Chairman, Senator Anderson, I definitely cannot speak to that, but I can say that the School of Energy Resources will continue to work on finding private support for this. And it just gets easier as we get more data, more information and are able to run more realistic cost assessments.
Okay. Go ahead.
Chairman, I think you asked Representative Burkhardt about nuclear, and he has done a yeoman's amount of work on nuclear. And so I would like to hear him tell us why we need the 2 million if he wants. Thank you.
And I'm just going to ask a quick question, Mr. Co-Chairman, if I can on this, and you can answer it together. I heard you mention in the comment of the nuclear of training faculty when they're pivoting or when they're learning something new. And I certainly support faculty learning new things, but I'm also curious about the university's efforts of attracting current experts in the field who aren't having to learn something new, but actually know all there is to know and are the lead on that front. I think that's what I would prefer to see. So go ahead.
Yeah, Madam Co-Chair. So that's a great point. So faculty that are already at the university have expertise that could be applied to nuclear is what I was trying to say. So making that switch does take effort, but to your point, we also need to bring in folks that can be leaders in this space and that do have expertise. So one of the things that $2 million is being used for is cost share for an NRC grant. So that NRC, Nuclear Regulatory Commission, funded, I think these are the right numbers. I think it was $600,000 to provide the startup package for a faculty member that is an expert in nuclear. And then we used $100,000 from that state allocated pool to help this person hit the ground running and actually just to make an attractive offer to them. Okay, and we're interviewing someone now. So we've gone through the search. I think that we have 3 candidates that are being interviewed now. So that is part of this as well. You know, just want to acknowledge that the University of Wyoming is supporting that person's salary and transitioning and bringing in someone to focus on this space. And I will let Representative Burkhardt answer his part of the question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Madam Co-Chair. So the $2 million would provide additional support SER into the university in the nuclear realm. It doesn't mean to set up a full nuclear engineering program, but it does mean to give the students and faculty expertise in those areas. Frankly, right now, all the companies involved in developing advanced nuclear reactors can use more chemical engineers and mechanical engineers than they can nuclear engineers. It gives those people at UW who are majoring in those engineering programs the opportunity to learn about nuclear. There are differences in there, in materials, in the engineering, one particular thermodynamics, the heat developed and how you use that heat. So it provides that. It provides additional money for sabbaticals to have faculty go and learn. It brings in guest faculty, which has already been done for the nuclear certificate program that was just recently completed. So that's some of it. It also would go to training those engineers to support companies currently in Wyoming. I really don't want to mention those companies because I don't have authority from them to do it, but we're already producing nuclear components in Wyoming. And there are numerous companies who are looking at using some of these advanced reactors. So it gives us a base to support those companies as they move forward. We've seen some memorandums of understanding already signed. So that's some of the things that this would support and give UW, the School of Energy Resources, the resources to further this area of expertise. Some of it probably go to the uranium industry people. Right now, uranium is up to about $50 a pound of yellow cake, which is just fantastic. But again, they're going to need people, engineers who are familiar with the nuclear realm. Doesn't mean they're nuclear engineers, but it means they have that educational background where they can move into that area with no trouble and make it a seamless change. We have companies who have signed memorandums of understanding to purchase reactors. Again, it gives those companies the opportunity to employ people, and it attracts more money. Right now, Wyoming as university has upped its graduates in engineering, business, economics tremendously in the past few years, and are one of the top in the nation on engineering graduates. The School of Energy Resources has done tremendous work in the realm of economics for nuclear power, which is something everybody forgets about. But if you don't address the money, you don't have a business. So those are some of the things where the money would go. I think it's well worthwhile. It will attract more money. So with that, I'll answer any questions you might have.
Okay, further questions on these topics from home? Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it. So it's 11:53. This is probably a good stopping point. And why don't we all come back at 1 o'clock?